Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was out in the backfield one afternoon putting in new fence posts. The old fence had seen better days. Posts rotted, wire sagging, and after the winter storms, a few sections had just fallen apart. I figured a weekend of work and I'd have it all fixed up again. I'd started early, and by mid-afternoon, I'd cleared the overgrown brush and pulled out the worst of the old posts. I was getting ready to dig holes for the new ones when I noticed something that made me stop. The old posts that were still standing, they weren't just leaning or broken like I expected. They were bent outward, away from the center of this patch of the field, in a near-perfect arc. At first I thought maybe a big animal had knocked them down or something, but the bend was too smooth, too consistent. The curve was like someone had pushed them out from inside all at once. The circle the posts formed was about 25 to 30 feet across. The ground inside was just grass, nothing unusual. No footprints, no disturbed earth. I scratched my head and walked around trying to figure out what had caused it. There was no sign of a storm or flood damage there, and the rest of the field looked untouched. I figured I must have missed something the last time I looked at this fence, but I'd been out here just a few weeks earlier, and the posts had been standing straight, even if a little weathered. I walked the perimeter of the circle slowly. The posts curved outward like a dome had pushed against them from inside, but I couldn't find anything inside the ring. No holes, no weird markings, just that strange bending. It felt off, like the field had shifted, but only in that exact spot. I told my wife about it that evening, but she just said maybe it was old machinery or some kind of farming equipment I'd forgotten about. I thought about that, but the bend was too smooth and all the same direction. Machines tend to smash or break things unevenly, not bend everything like a bow. The next morning, I came back out to the circle early just to look at it in daylight. The air was still cool and the field smelled like wet earth and grass. When I got there, the posts looked the same, but the light made the bending more obvious. The wood was splintered in places, but there was no fresh damage, just old, weathered cracks. As I stood there, I started hearing this low hum. It wasn't loud, more like a vibration under the ground. I figured it was a tractor or some kind of machinery from a neighbor's farm, so I looked around. The nearest farm was a good distance away, and I couldn't see or hear anything moving. The hum faded after a few seconds. I went to the circle again the following night, just after sunset. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to see if the circle looked different in the dark or if anything else was going on. I brought a flashlight, but I didn't really expect to find anything. That night, the posts looked darker, the bends casting long shadows in the beam from my flashlight. I felt kind of exposed out there, but the field was quiet. Then something caught my eye. A faint glow coming from inside the circle, just beyond the bent posts. It wasn't bright, more like a soft, pale light hovering just above the grass. I froze and watched for a minute. The glow stayed in one spot, flickering slightly, but didn't grow or move toward me. It didn't seem like any kind of fire or flashlight, just light. I didn't hear any sounds from it, just that same low hum I'd heard before. I wanted to call out or get closer, but something made me hold back. I kept my distance, shining my flashlight around the circle, but there was nothing else there. Then the light disappeared slowly, like someone turned it off. I left the field that night with an uneasy feeling I can't really explain. When I got home, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, but my battery was down more than I remembered. It felt like the signal was weaker than usual too. The next day, I talked to a couple of neighbors, but no one else had seen or heard anything strange out by the fence. One of them mentioned how the weather had been weird lately, some days hotter than expected, others foggy in the morning, but no real storms or anything that could explain the bent posts. Over the next week, I kept going back to that spot at different times of day. Sometimes I'd hear the hum, sometimes I'd see the faint glow, but it was never consistent. No one else seemed to notice anything, and I started wondering if I was imagining it. One afternoon, while I was repairing a broken section of fence near the circle, I caught the scent of something strange in the air. It wasn't like anything I'd smelled before. Metallic, but not sharp, kind of sweet and faint, like burnt plastic mixed with something earthy. I looked around, but couldn't find a source. The smell lingered just for a moment and then vanished. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing small creaks from outside, like wood flexing or settling, but nothing that made sense, given how calm the night was. I got up a few times and checked the window facing the field. The moonlight made the bent posts look like shadows reaching out. At one point, I thought I saw a shape moving inside the circle, a quick flicker of something just beyond the tree line. When I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, it was gone. No footprints in the grass, nothing disturbed. A few days later, I noticed that one of the posts on the edge of the circle had shifted a little more. It was bent farther out than before. I didn't touch it. It just felt like whatever had bent those posts was still active somehow. That night, I left a camera set up, pointed at the circle. The next morning, I checked the footage. For hours, nothing happened, but right at 2:58 a.m., the camera picked up a faint glow near the center of the circle. It hovered and pulsed gently, then vanished at 3:05 a.m. I rewound the footage again and again. There was no sound on the recording, just the glow. The camera's internal clock matched the real time perfectly. I told a few friends who work in agriculture or land management, but no one could explain it. Some said it might be the effect of underground gas or something natural, but I doubted it. Nothing about that glow or the bends felt natural. One night, about 2 weeks after I first found the bent posts, I went out again with a flashlight. It was late, probably around midnight. As I walked into the circle, the air seemed heavier, thicker. I swear I could feel eyes on me, like something was watching from just beyond sight. The hum started again, low and steady, and the faint glow appeared near the center of the ring. I stood still, trying to make sense of it, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. The screen flickered and went black. I tried turning it back on, but it wouldn't respond. I put it away and looked up. The glow was gone. I left the field quickly that night, but on the way back to the house, I thought I heard something moving in the bushes beside the road. I stopped and listened. Nothing. Since then, the circle hasn't changed much. The posts stay bent in that same arc, and the glow and hum come and go without pattern. I haven't touched the old fence anymore. Part of me wants to rip it all out and start fresh, but another part doesn't want to disturb it. I don't know what's happening out there. It doesn't seem dangerous, but it feels wrong. Like there's something just beneath the surface of the field, something watching and waiting. I'm still working around it, fixing what I can, but every time I'm near that circle, I feel uneasy, like I'm not alone. Whatever it is, it's there, silent, still, and somehow more than just a bent fence. I work the graveyard shift at a small satellite radio station out in the middle of nowhere. It's mostly dead air and pre-recorded stuff. But every night from 3:03 to 3:05 a.m., something weird cuts in on one of our frequencies. It's like clockwork, and no one knows where it's coming from. I first noticed it a few months back. I was bored out of my mind, just scrolling through the soundboard and checking the signal feeds, when the usual white noise suddenly changed. At exactly 3:03, this pattern of pulses and mechanical clicking started playing on one of our less popular channels. I thought maybe it was a test tone or some weird interference from a nearby transmitter, so I checked the logs. Nothing scheduled for that time, and no other reports of interference. The sounds themselves were strange, rhythmic, but not musical. Like someone was sending a message in code, but not Morse or anything I recognized. The clicking was sharp, almost metallic, but oddly regular. It repeated the same sequence every night. I tried recording it on the station's main computer, but oddly, the recording software kept crashing or freezing during the broadcast window. I figured maybe the file was corrupt or some glitch in the system. I saved what I could, but even that felt incomplete. After a week of hearing the broadcast, I mentioned it to my supervisor. He brushed it off as interference from a satellite or something natural, But when I pressed, he told me the engineering team looked into it and couldn't trace it. There was no known source. The satellite logs showed nothing unusual, and all our equipment was running normally. So I started keeping a log myself, noting the exact time and duration. Every night, like clockwork, from 3:03 to 3:05, the pulses and clicks played on that channel. Nothing else, no signal before or after, just those 2 minutes. I tried tuning in on different receivers around the building, same thing. It was definitely coming in through the satellite feed. One night, I decided to try something different. I set up my phone to record audio nearby the speakers during the broadcast. When I listened back in the morning, the recording was silent except for the faint hum of the room. No pulses, no clicking. I was baffled. The radio definitely played the sounds, but my phone didn't pick them up at all. It was like the sounds existed only inside the station's equipment or speakers. A few nights later, I noticed something else. The temperature in the studio would drop slightly during the broadcast. Not enough to be uncomfortable, but definitely noticeable. I checked the thermostat logs, and they confirmed a consistent 2-degree drop during that exact 2-minute window. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but there were no storms in the forecast. I mentioned it to a coworker, but he just laughed, said I was imagining things. After a couple weeks, I started hearing faint noises around the building right after the broadcast ended. Nothing clear, just soft thuds or scraping sounds from outside. I went out to check a few times, but found nothing. The security cameras showed no movement. It was like something was there, but invisible or out of frame. The weirdest part was that my phone would lose signal or randomly restart during those nights when I was in the building. Not just during the broadcast, but up to an hour before and after. I swapped phones, tried different carriers, but it happened every time I was near the studio between midnight and 4 a.m. One night, I brought in a handheld radio scanner to see if anything else was on the frequency. Around 3 a.m., I heard static like usual, but as it hit 3:03, the rhythmic clicks came through loud and clear on the scanner. Except this time there was another layer, a low humming sound, almost like a motor winding up beneath the clicking. It was faint and constant, but definitely there. After 3:05, it stopped. That same night, I noticed the lights in the building flickered just before the broadcast started. Not a full blackout, just a brief dimming, like the power grid hiccuped. I checked with the local utility company the next day. They said there were no reported outages or issues. I started feeling watched during those nights, especially around 3 a.m. The security cameras showed nothing, but I'd catch glimpses of shadows moving just at the edge of my vision when I stepped away from the equipment. No one else was in the building, but the feeling was real. I even found the door to the server room unlocked once when I was sure I'd locked it before starting my shift. One morning, I found a small scratch on the console, like a fingernail scrape, but I'm the only one who has access at night, and the station is locked up tight. I can't explain how it got there. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know if someone's been sneaking in or if something else is going on. I tried to talk about it with the engineering guys again, but they just said it was probably a glitch in the satellite signal or some kind of interference from space debris. That didn't explain the temperature drop, the phone issues, or the scratch. Last week, I stayed later after my shift ended. Around 3:10 a.m., I heard a soft tapping on the window behind the studio. I froze, waited for a minute, but when I looked, there was nothing there. No branches, no animals. Just empty darkness. I don't know if anyone else hears the broadcast. It's on a frequency barely anyone listens to, and I've never found a recording that plays outside the station. It's like it's meant only for this one place. Whatever it is, it's there every night, but no one can explain it. The strangest part is that despite all this, the station runs perfectly fine the rest of the time. No malfunctions, no interruptions, no visitors. Just me, the broadcast, and that 2-minute window where everything feels off. I keep thinking maybe I'm losing it, or maybe I'm reading too much into things. But then I remember that scratch on the console and the chill that hits right before 3:03 every night. I don't know what it means, or if it means anything at all. I just know it's there. I was out walking my dog one night, just like I did most nights, around 10 p.m. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly just the sound of my dog sniffing the grass and the occasional car passing way off in the distance. I usually liked these walks because it gave me some time to clear my head after work, away from the noise and the screen. That night, the air felt different. Not cold exactly, but heavy, like something was pressing down a little more than usual. I didn't think much of it at first, just the usual late fall stillness settling in. I was halfway down the block when my dog stopped dead in his tracks, ears perked straight up. He stared up toward the treetops at the end of the street, his tail low but stiff. I looked up too, expecting to see a bird or maybe a plane, but there was nothing moving. Then I saw it. It was this shape, hovering maybe 30 feet above the tops of the tallest trees. Perfectly still. It wasn't blinking or shining or anything like that. Just a dark shape. No wings, no movement, no sound. It didn't look like any bird or drone I've ever seen. It was kind of oval, maybe the size of a large car or a small van, but because it was so still and silent, it was hard to tell. The edges weren't sharp, they blended a bit with the dark sky. It almost looked like a shadow, but it was definitely three-dimensional. I blinked a couple of times, thinking maybe my eyes were messing with me. My dog growled low, a quiet rumble in his throat, and tugged on the leash. I was frozen for a minute, just staring at it. The neighborhood was still dead silent except for the sound of my dog shifting his weight, watching that shape. After maybe a minute, the shape just vanished. It didn't move away or drop down. It simply disappeared like someone switched off a light. I looked around. Nothing. The trees moved softly in the breeze. The streetlights cast long, yellow pools of light, but no sign of whatever it was. My dog kept looking up for a few more seconds, then finally pulled me forward like he wanted to get away. I started walking again, but my heart was pounding. I kept looking back the whole way home, expecting to see it again, but the sky was empty. The next day, I told a coworker about it, and he joked maybe it was a UFO. I laughed, but inside, I wasn't so sure. Over the next few nights, I kept going on the same walk. Nothing. No shape, no silence, no feeling like I was being watched, just the usual quiet. Then, 3 nights later, it happened again. Almost exactly the same spot, almost the same time. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see it again, but as I passed the corner, there it was. The same dark, still shape hovering above the treetops. No sound, no movement. This time I had my phone with me, but when I tried to get a video, the screen wouldn't focus on it. It just showed a black blur where the shape was. The camera acted like there was something there, but nothing my eyes could capture. I stood there longer this time, watching it. The street was completely silent again, even the wind seemed to have stopped. My dog was stiff, alert, but didn't bark. Then the streetlights flickered briefly. The shape didn't move, but the light flicker felt like a warning or a signal. After about 5 minutes, the shape slowly began to fade, like it was dissolving into the night sky, and then it was gone again. I went home that night feeling weird. It wasn't fear exactly, more like confusion mixed with unease. I kept thinking about what it could be. I tried to talk to a few neighbors over the next week, but nobody else had seen or heard anything unusual. It was like it was just me. One evening, a few days after the second sighting, I was sitting on my porch when I noticed something else odd. There was a soft, pulsing glow coming from the edge of the woods behind the houses across the street. It wasn't bright or steady, just a faint shimmer that lasted maybe 10 seconds, then disappeared. I stared at it, wondering if it was some weird light from a campfire or a reflection, but nothing was out there. No cars, no people. The whole neighborhood was quiet again. I mentioned it to my partner, but they just said I was letting my imagination run wild. Maybe I was. I don't know. A few nights later, I was on my walk again. This time, the shape didn't appear, but I felt like something was different. I kept hearing this low humming sound, very faint, almost like the kind of noise you get when you're near an electric transformer. But when I looked for a source, there was nothing. No transformers nearby, no power lines. The humming wasn't steady. It would fade in and out, always around the same spot near the treetops. I started feeling uneasy, like I was being watched, but every time I turned to look behind me, no one was there. No shadows moving, no sounds other than the humming. On one walk, I took a different route just to see if the feeling followed me. It did. The humming was there, quieter maybe, but still there. I didn't tell anyone else because I didn't want to sound crazy. Then one night, something else happened that unsettled me more than anything. I was about to turn down my street when my dog suddenly jerked toward the sidewalk and growled. I looked up and saw two small, dim lights flickering just above the tree line. Not like car headlights, more like tiny pinpoints of light that seemed to pulse and shift slowly. They weren't the dark shape from before. These were small, bright, and moving very slowly, almost hovering. I blinked, and they disappeared. I stood there frozen, and my dog was still growling low. After a few seconds, I decided to head home. The rest of the walk was silent, but the feeling of those two lights hovering there stayed with me. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows and tried to shake the feeling. Over the next week, I kept expecting to see those lights or the shape again, but they didn't show. The weirdness didn't stop, though. Sometimes I'd find my dog staring up at the sky, ears perked, but nothing visible there. Sometimes I'd notice the street lamp flickering, just like before. One night, I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. because the room felt bright. I looked out the window and saw a soft white glow coming from the woods across the street. I stared at it for a few minutes, but it never got brighter or moved. Then it faded away slowly. I couldn't sleep after that. After a while, the lights and the shape just stopped appearing. The humming faded. The street lamp stopped flickering. But even now, months later, I still catch myself glancing up at the treetops, waiting to see if that dark shape will come back or those tiny lights will flicker again. I don't know what it was. I don't know if anyone else saw it. And I don't know why it chose that quiet little neighborhood, or why it waited for me to be out there walking my dog at exactly the same time. It just happened. And I'm still not sure if it was real or just something my eyes wanted to see on a quiet night. I pulled off around 2:30 in the morning, somewhere along Route 87 in Arizona. Not a real rest stop, just one of those wide gravel shoulders near a scrubby patch of desert with nothing around for miles. I was ahead of schedule and figured I'd catch a few hours of sleep before the sun came up. It was dead quiet, no headlights for a while in either direction. So I killed the engine, cracked the window an inch, and climbed into the sleeper. I remember how still it was. Even the breeze felt like it had stopped. Just that faint ticking sound the engine makes as it cools and the occasional creak of the trailer settling. I wasn't uncomfortable. I'd been driving long enough to get used to sleeping in strange places, and honestly, I was out within 10 minutes. I didn't dream, or if I did, I don't remember it. What I do remember is waking up way too suddenly, like my brain skipped the usual fog. It was still dark, but I could tell dawn wasn't far off. That deep blue-gray kind of light. I sat up and checked my phone. It was 4:46. I hadn't planned to get moving until at least 6. Then I noticed how quiet it was again. Too quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just this heavy silence, like sound was being sucked into the dirt. I slid into the driver's seat and looked out. The window was fogged a little from the inside, but I could still make out the gravel shoulder, the mesquite trees, the empty highway. Nothing seemed off right away, but I got this weird feeling like I was being watched. Not in a paranoid way, more like how you feel when you realize someone's already been there. That's when I noticed the ground. There were lines in the dirt. Not tire marks, not footprints, just long, thin grooves carved into the gravel and dust, circling the truck in a kind of wide, uneven ring. I couldn't tell if they went all the way around. The rearview mirrors didn't catch the full picture, but I could see at least 3 thick arcs that connected into each other, and within them were smaller shapes. Not letters, not anything I could recognize. They were shallow, like someone had scraped the end of a stick through the dirt, but the lines were perfectly straight. No stutters or breaks, just clean and deliberate. I opened the door and stepped down, boots crunching on the gravel. The air felt colder than it should have been, dry and heavy. I walked a slow circle around the cab, staring at the ground. The markings really did go all the way around, a wide outer ring, and inside that, a scattered pattern of triangles, lines, and one spiral, maybe 6 feet across. Nothing looked rushed. There weren't any footprints leading in or out. and no tire tracks besides mine. I crouched down and touched one of the lines. The dirt was dry, but the grooves were fresh, the way the edges crumbled when I brushed them. Whatever made them had done it recently, probably while I was sleeping. I stood up and looked around. Desert in every direction, low shrubs, some old barbed wire fencing off in the distance. The highway was still empty. I didn't hear anything. No birds, no bugs, not even the sound of wind hitting the trailer. It felt like I was standing in a vacuum. I got back in the truck and shut the door. Locked it too, without even thinking. My hands were cold. I just sat there for a while, not starting the engine, not touching anything. Just trying to figure out how someone could have gotten that close without waking me up. I'm a light sleeper usually. I've kicked awake just from a gust of wind rocking the cab before. But this? Nothing. I considered the possibility that maybe I'd done it myself. Sleepwalking or something. But there wasn't a single mark connecting the symbols to the truck. The line started a good 2 feet away from the tires and never crossed over. And I've never sleepwalked in my life. Plus, even if I had, there's no way I could have drawn that much, that cleanly, in the dark. Eventually, I cranked the engine. The sound broke the silence hard, like slamming a door in a quiet house. I eased the truck back onto the road without looking back. I figured I'd stop somewhere for gas and maybe check the undercarriage in daylight, just in case. That's when I saw it. Maybe 10 miles down the highway, there was a turnout with a wide gravel pad and a big yellow sign, "Next services 56 miles." I pulled off to stretch my legs, still trying to shake the weird tension in my chest. When I got out, I noticed the dust on the side of the trailer had been disturbed. There were marks, not handprints, not words, just streaks, maybe half an inch wide, starting near the top and dragging down about 4 feet. Not finger-shaped, not even smudges, really. Just faint lines, like something had skimmed the surface in parallel rows. There were 7 of them. They didn't look like they'd been made by tools. No scratches, no paint transfer, just clean, dry markings. I rubbed at one with my thumb and it smeared a little, but not much. Like it had been there only a short time, long enough to settle, but not enough to bake in. The roof of the trailer was too high for anyone to reach without a ladder. I sure hadn't leaned anything against it. And I didn't stop anywhere else between the pull-off and here. I looked underneath, checked the wheel wells, the fuel tanks. Nothing strange, no damage, no loose wiring or broken seals. Everything looked normal. But the silence stuck with me. Even here, at this wide turnout, I didn't hear birds or cars or anything. I drove straight through to Phoenix after that, stopping only for fuel. I didn't sleep the rest of the way. 2 days later, I hosed off the trailer at a truck wash near Tucson. I didn't mention the markings. They were still faintly visible until the water hit them, then they just vanished. No residue, no discoloration, just gone. I didn't tell dispatch either. What would I say? That someone snuck up on me in the middle of nowhere, drew some shapes around my truck, touched the trailer 12 feet off the ground, and left without a sound? I didn't even tell my wife until a few weeks later, and even then I kept it vague. Said I saw weird symbols and let her laugh it off. I haven't parked in a remote spot like that since. I still take breaks, but I stick to lit rest stops or truck plazas now, somewhere with people around, somewhere with sound. The part that gets me, though, and maybe this is nothing, is that ever since that night, my dash cam won't save anything after 2:43 a.m. I've reset it, replaced the card, even swapped in a whole new unit. It records fine. Everything looks normal. But if I check the files in the morning, there's always a gap from 2:43 to 4 a.m. every night, no matter where I am. I've stopped trying to fix it. I started running at 11:06. I remember that because I glanced at my watch before I left the house. It had been raining earlier, but the clouds cleared up and left everything damp and shining under the streetlights. I like running that late. Less traffic, less noise, just the sound of my shoes and the occasional drip from the trees. There's a loop I do through the neighborhood and out past the golf course, maybe 3 miles total. I don't usually see anyone. Sometimes a dog barking behind a fence, maybe someone's porch light turning on. That night felt normal. A little cooler than usual, but not cold. My breath fogged a little when I exhaled. The first weird thing happened about halfway through. I was coming up the backside of the loop, right where the sidewalk cuts between the chain link fence and that long stretch of hedges behind the condos. No houses face that section, and there aren't any streetlights, just this one motion sensor lamp above a utility box, and even that flickers sometimes. I was in the middle of checking my pace when I looked down and saw the time jump. 1 second it said 11:29, and the next it jumped to 12:22. No notifications, no buzz on my wrist, just a blink, and it was almost an hour later. I stopped running immediately, pulled the watch closer to my face, tapped the screen a couple times, but everything else looked normal. Battery was fine, no new messages or missed calls. It had recorded the run up to that point, heart rate, distance, elevation, but then there was this long, flat gap. No data between 11:30 and 12:20. I checked my phone just to make sure it wasn't the watch acting up. It said 12:23. I turned around, looked back down the sidewalk. It was empty. No cars, no people, no movement at all. Just this long, damp stretch of pavement lined with hedges and chain link, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I thought maybe I'd zoned out. That happens sometimes, especially on familiar routes, but not for 50 minutes, and not without noticing. I started walking back the way I came, not running, just walking. My legs didn't feel tired, but something in my chest felt off, tight, and sort of floaty. Then I saw the footprints. They weren't there before. I know that sounds weird to say, but I'd just come down that exact sidewalk not 10 minutes earlier. There were no footprints then. Now, there was a set of them. Pale, bare footprints in the damp concrete. No shoes, no tread marks. Just 2 feet, side by side, pointed toward the street. The sidewalk wasn't wet enough to hold a print unless something had stepped in actual water before walking across it. These prints looked fresh, like they'd just been made. They were long and narrow, with almost no arch. I looked around again. Nothing. No cars, no open gates, no rustling in the hedges. I walked closer to the prints and noticed something else. There was no stride. Just those 2 feet, flat and still, like someone had stood there and vanished. No steps leading to or away. I took a step back and just stood there for a while. My watch ticked over to 12:28. I could hear my own breathing. I don't know what made me do it, but I looked up. Not just glanced, but actually tilted my head back and stared straight up at the sky. There weren't any stars. No clouds either. Just a solid black sky, like someone had cut out a sheet of paper and taped it over everything. It wasn't just dark, it looked flat. And in that moment, I had this sensation I can't really explain. Like I wasn't supposed to be looking. Like something above me had just looked away, and I barely missed it. I started walking again, not running. I didn't want to make noise. I cut through the next block instead of finishing the loop. I just wanted to be somewhere with lights and houses. Something about that stretch of sidewalk suddenly felt wrong, like if I turned around again, there'd be more footprints behind me. When I reached the corner near the elementary school, I saw a shape down by the swings, just standing there. Too far to make out details, but it wasn't moving. The playground was lit by 2 old floodlights mounted on a pole. One of them was flickering, casting this slow pulse across the monkey bars and sand pit. The figure was just inside the edge of the light. It didn't move, didn't sway, just stood there facing the fence. I didn't stop walking, but I slowed down. Something about the way it stood didn't look right. Arms too close to the body, head tilted slightly, like it was listening. I crossed the street and stayed on the opposite sidewalk. I didn't want to take my eyes off it, but I didn't want to stare either. When I passed the school and looked back, it was gone. I didn't hear it leave. No sound at all. I got home at 12:49. My front door was locked. Nothing was out of place. I went inside, turned on every light, and just stood in the kitchen for a while. I checked the watch again. The run had stopped recording at 12:23. It logged 2.9 miles and then cut off. I uploaded the data to my phone. The route was there up until the time jump, then a blank line. No GPS signal drop, no heart rate, no elevation change. Just a flat void. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went back out around 7 just to see if the prints were still there. They weren't, but there was a faint curved smear where they'd been. Not footprints, exactly, more like the residue you get after wiping something away with a wet rag. The shape was right, though. That same curve at the edge of the heel. I haven't run that loop since. I still go out, just not past the golf course and not after midnight. I keep the watch, but I stopped wearing it at night. Every once in a while, I'll glance at it and see the time blink forward a few seconds. Not often, maybe once a month. The last time it happened, I was in my driveway, just getting back from work, reaching for the door. Time blinked. 6:41 to 6:42. When I looked up, there was a damp footprint on the concrete behind my car. Bare, pale, and the sky was perfectly clear. I worked the night shift at a gas station just off the highway for a few months last fall. It wasn't much, mostly the usual. A couple of drunks stopping for beer, truckers grabbing snacks, the occasional late-night traveler pulling in for gas. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. But there was this one thing that started happening a few weeks in, and I never could explain it. Every night, around 2:17 a.m., this silver sedan would pull up and park directly across the street from the station. Not in any of the nearby parking spots, just on the side of the road, right under this old street lamp. The weird part? Nobody ever got out of the car. The engine would turn off, the headlights would go dark, and the whole thing would just sit there. Silent. Empty looking, but no one ever moved it. I first noticed it when I was stepping outside for a cigarette. The glow from the street lamp made the car's paint look almost metallic, like it was polished to a mirror finish. The windows were tinted, but not so dark that you couldn't see inside at all. The seats were empty every time I glanced over. At first, I thought maybe someone was hiding out in there, waiting for someone, or maybe it was stolen and abandoned. But the car was always clean. No dust, no leaves or bugs on it, nothing that would suggest it'd been sitting there for days. It showed up the same time every night, 2:17 a.m., almost like clockwork, and it was gone by the time I finished my shift around 6 a.m. I mentioned it to a couple of regular customers and coworkers, but no one else had seen the car. I figured maybe I was imagining it or seeing things in the dark. But then I got a little more curious. One night, I decided to take a better look. I finished up inside, locked the station door behind me, and walked slowly across the street. The air was chilly, and the only sounds were distant crickets and the faint hum of passing cars on the highway. The sedan was there, exactly where I expected, sitting perfectly still. I circled it once, looking for anything unusual. The tires were all fully inflated, the windshield was spotless, no notes stuck to the door or windshield, no scratches, no dents, just a clean, silent car. I stared inside. No one. I called out, "Hey, is someone in there?" Nothing. The car didn't respond. I half expected some kind of answer, even a muffled one, but the street was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. That night, I felt like I was being watched. Not by anyone I could see, but like something was paying attention to me from the darkness beyond the street lamp's reach. I shook it off and went back inside. A few nights later, I decided to set up my phone to record outside the window. I wanted to catch whatever it was on video, or maybe prove to myself I was just losing it. I set the phone on the counter facing the window and let it record through my whole shift. When I checked the footage the next morning, the car did show up at exactly 2:17 a.m., just like always, but something was off. The headlights never came on, but the street lamp's light around it dimmed slightly, like the car was absorbing some of the glow. The weirdest part was how the air around the car looked on video. It shimmered, like heat rising off pavement on a hot day, but the night was cold. It wasn't fog, just this slight distortion, like the space around the car was bending or vibrating. I didn't say anything about it, not even to myself at first. I was already feeling uneasy, and the last thing I wanted was to convince myself I was seeing ghosts or something worse. Then one night, about a week later, something new happened. The car showed up at 2:17 a.m., as usual, but this time, a figure appeared inside. I saw it from the corner of my eye, a shadowy shape shifting behind the windshield. I froze, unsure if I'd really seen it or if my brain was messing with me. The figure didn't move or get out of the car. It was just there, sitting still. The interior lights never came on, but the outline was definitely human. maybe a man, but I couldn't tell for sure. The figure didn't wave, didn't look at me, just sat facing forward. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes, heart racing, feeling like I was trespassing by just looking. Then the figure vanished. I blinked, and it was gone. I checked outside immediately, but the car was empty again. No one anywhere nearby. That's when the quiet started changing. I began hearing noises around the station late at night, faint tapping sounds like someone was knocking on the walls. But no one was there when I went out to check. Sometimes the fluorescent lights inside the station flickered. Once, the power cut out for exactly 30 seconds. No storms, no outages reported anywhere nearby. When the lights came back on, the car was gone, and I was alone. I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a prank or an animal messing with the wiring. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. One night, I tried to confront it. When the car arrived, I stepped outside, crossed the street again. I called out, "Who are you? What do you want?" No answer. The figure didn't appear that time, just the empty car sitting silent. I stood there for a while, but my nerves got the better of me. I walked back to the station and locked the door behind me. After that, the car kept showing up every night at the same time, but the figure never came back. A few times I thought I saw headlights far down the road, like someone was watching me from a distance, but every time I looked directly, there was nothing. The strangest thing happened on my last night working there. Around 2:17 a.m., the car pulled up, but the street lamp above it went out completely. Total darkness, except for the faint glow of the gas station's sign across the street. I watched the car, waiting for the figure, the shimmer, anything. Nothing happened. Then slowly, the car just vanished. I mean, it wasn't driving away. It was just gone. One second it was there, the next it wasn't. I stepped outside, looked around. No tire tracks, no signs it had moved. It was like it disappeared into thin air. I told the manager I was done after that night. I wasn't sleeping well, and the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. I never saw the car again after I quit, but sometimes when I'm driving late and past that stretch of highway, I swear I catch a glimpse of something silver just sitting under that old street lamp, waiting for 2:17 a.m. I was night fishing off the coast, maybe a mile or so out from the inlet. It wasn't unusual for me. I've done it for years, sometimes solo, sometimes with my cousin. That night, I was alone. Calm water, no wind, stars just barely visible through a thin cloud layer. The kind of quiet where the only sounds are the creak of the boat and the occasional plunk of water against the sides. I dropped anchor around 10:30 p.m., figured I'd do some bottom fishing for a few hours before heading in. I had a small lantern hanging off the back rail and a headlamp strapped over my hat. No other boats in sight, just dark water all around and the faint glow of the shoreline way off behind me. I cast out and waited. I wasn't catching much, but I didn't care. I liked the quiet. Around midnight, I heard this tapping sound. It wasn't the usual kind of creak or bump you get from waves or the anchor line. It was slow and steady, like someone lightly knocking on the hull. 3 taps, then a pause, then 3 more. Not loud, but clear. I stood up and swung my light around, thinking maybe some driftwood had bumped up against me. There was nothing, just black water in every direction. I leaned over the side, shined my headlamp down into the water. It only lit up a few feet, but there was no debris, no fish breaking the surface, no birds. I figured maybe it was the current playing tricks or something brushing underneath that I couldn't see. Then it happened again. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. I walked to the other side of the boat, but the sound didn't follow. It stayed near the rear by the stern, close to where the lantern was hanging. I knelt down and leaned over, listening. The tapping stopped for a few minutes. Just as I was about to stand up, it came back, this time right below where I was crouching. 3 slow taps, then nothing. I pulled the lantern up, thinking maybe it was attracting fish or something, but as soon as I did, I felt this weird sensation, like the air changed. Not colder exactly, just denser, heavier. I could hear my own breathing in my ears, and everything around me seemed quieter than before. No bugs, no birds from the shore. Even the water seemed to stop moving. I stood there holding the lantern and staring into the water for maybe 10 minutes. Nothing moved. Then the boat shifted slightly, like something brushed against it from underneath. That's when I got the first real spike of unease. I've had sharks bump the boat before, even dolphins, but this was different. It wasn't a hit or a jolt, just a slow, almost deliberate push, like someone placing their hand on the hull and dragging it. I turned off the lantern to see better out into the dark, thinking maybe the reflection was messing with my night vision. When I did, it was like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I couldn't see anything. No stars, no horizon, not even the outline of the water. Then I heard it again. 3 taps, same rhythm. I turned the lantern back on and scanned the water with it, moving slowly in all directions. Still nothing. I dropped the light down on a rope and lowered it toward the surface, hoping to get a better view below. That's when I noticed the surface of the water wasn't reflecting properly. It looked dull, not rippling like normal, almost like glass with something behind it, warping the light slightly. I reached down and dipped my hand in, half expecting it to be colder or thicker or something, but it felt normal. Just regular seawater. I pulled my hand out and waited. Then I saw the light flicker. Not from the lantern, from below it, like something passed between the light and the bottom of the boat. It was fast, just a ripple in the glow, like something large had glided past beneath the surface. That's when I hauled the lantern up quick and reeled in my line. I didn't care if I left the bait or the rig, I just didn't want it hanging overboard anymore. I started the engine. It coughed once, then died. Tried again. Nothing. Third time, it sputtered for a second, then cut out completely. I checked the fuel line, that spark plug, kill switch. Everything looked fine. No reason it shouldn't start. I keep a backup battery-powered radio for weather reports and emergencies. Pulled it out, turned it on. Just static. I checked the antenna, switched channels. Nothing but hissing white noise. It felt like something was messing with everything electronic. Even my headlamp started dimming, though the batteries were fresh. I sat in the captain's chair and waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe for something to break the surface or for the fog to roll in. I didn't know. Then the tapping started again. This time, slower. 1 tap, pause, 2 taps, pause, 1 more. It felt like it was trying to communicate something, though I couldn't make sense of it. I stayed frozen in the chair for a long time. I didn't look over the edge again. I didn't touch anything. I just sat there, listening. Eventually, I realized the air had gone back to normal. The pressure in my head eased up, and I could hear the distant hum of crickets from shore again. I tried the engine one more time. It started on the first turn. The radio clicked on too, just as suddenly, mid-broadcast, like nothing had happened. I didn't waste time. Pulled the anchor, turned toward the inlet, and headed in as fast as the boat would go without risking anything. When I got back to the dock, I tied off and checked the hull with my flashlight. No scratches, no dents, nothing unusual. But I noticed the lantern, the one I'd pulled up before, had gone completely dead. Batteries were fine. Bulb wasn't burned out. It just wouldn't turn on again. I left it on the workbench in my garage. A few days later, I checked it again, and it worked like normal. I haven't gone out solo at night since then. I've been back out on the water plenty of times, even near the same spot, but only during the day. And I've never heard that tapping again. I was driving through the northern stretch of I-80, doing a night haul from Wyoming to Nebraska. It was the kind of trip I'd done 100 times, mostly empty roads and that quiet hum of the engine. Around 2 a.m., I was just cruising, keeping my eyes on the road and the usual stars overhead, when something felt off. I don't know what exactly triggered it, maybe the way the air suddenly got colder, or the way the radio static flickered for a second. I looked up and saw something huge moving silently across the sky. It wasn't like any plane I'd ever seen. No blinking lights, no engine noise, just this massive dark shape gliding slowly above me, so big that it blocked out a good chunk of the stars. It didn't have a shape I could easily describe. Not round, not triangular, just this dark shadow against the sky. It moved without a sound, like it was floating. I slammed the brakes and pulled over on the shoulder, my heart pounding more than usual. The truck shook a little from the sudden stop. I grabbed my phone, trying to get a picture, but it was too dark and moving too fast for the camera to focus. The whole thing passed over me in maybe 10 seconds. It was low enough that I could have reached out and touched it if I'd been outside. I kept staring after it until it vanished into the distance and the stars started to peek back out. I sat there for a while, trying to tell myself it was some kind of weird cloud or a big bird. But it was way too silent and too big for that. I felt like the whole sky went dead for a moment. After a few minutes, I pulled back on the road and kept driving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The highway was empty except for my headlights, but I kept catching glimpses of shadows flicking past the trees on the side, too quick and weirdly shaped to be animals. I kept checking my mirrors, but there was nothing behind me. When I got to my next stop and hooked up to the Wi-Fi, I pulled up my dashcam footage to see if I'd caught anything. The camera runs the whole time, and normally it shows a clear record. But for the exact time when that thing passed over, the footage was missing. Just a blank gap in the middle of the video file, like someone hit the delete button. The files before and after were fine, no corruption or glitches, just this clean missing chunk of about 10 seconds. I tried everything to recover it. Different software, resetting the system, even checking the SD card for errors. Nothing. It was like that part of the video never existed. I didn't tell anyone at the truck stop. I don't know who I would have told anyway. People would just laugh it off or say I was tired and seeing things. The rest of my trip was uneventful. I kept driving, but the silence in the cab felt heavier, like the truck was carrying more than just freight. I found myself looking up at the sky a lot, half expecting to see that shadow again. When I got home, I checked the dash cam again. Same missing segment. The truck worked fine, no weird noises or glitches besides the video. But every time I try to think back to that night, I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Like there's a piece of memory missing. Just like that video. I keep wondering if it was real or if I imagined it. But the empty spot on the footage won't let me pretend it wasn't. It's the strangest thing I've ever experienced, and I still don't know what it was. I was out on the lake with my girlfriend, Jenna. We had the small boat rented just for the night. The plan was simple, a little escape, away from everything. The town's lights faded behind us as we drifted farther out past where the shoreline's glow could reach. The water was calm, the night sky clear and full of stars. We'd been sitting quietly for a while, just watching the sky and listening to the water lap against the hull. Jenna was leaning back, eyes closed, and I was staring up at the stars, trying to pick out the constellations I barely remembered from school. The North Star was easy. It sat right there, steady and bright, just like always. Then, out of nowhere, another light appeared beside it. It was almost perfect. Same size, same brightness. I blinked, thinking maybe it was some kind of planet or satellite I hadn't noticed before. Jenna opened her eyes and sat up. "Did you see that?" she asked. I nodded, pointing. The second star didn't flicker or move sideways. It just hung there, almost too perfectly still. We both just stared, neither of us saying much. After a few minutes, I realized the weirdest part. The new light wasn't just close to the North Star. It was exactly aligned beside it, like someone had put it there deliberately. I tried to track it to see if it would move, but it didn't shift an inch. Then, without any warning, it started to drop. Straight down, vertical, like it was falling through the sky. But the strange thing was, as it got closer to the water, there was no splash, no ripple, nothing. The surface stayed perfectly still. I squinted, thinking maybe it was some kind of trick of the light or my eyes playing games, but Jenna shook her head, just as confused. We sat frozen for a moment, both watching the spot where the light had disappeared. The water was completely calm, like nothing had touched it. I reached for my phone to try and get a picture, but there was no signal out here. The screen said, "No service." Jenna's phone was the same. I told her we should probably head back. The boat engine wasn't loud, but the silence felt thick, like the kind of quiet that makes you realize how alone you are. As I started the motor, I kept glancing up, expecting maybe to see the light again, or another one, but the sky looked normal now, just the regular stars, the same ones I always saw. On the way back, I noticed something else. There was this low humming sound, faint but constant. It wasn't from the boat or the engine. It didn't seem natural, but it wasn't loud or sudden either. More like a background noise, almost too low to notice unless you really listened. I asked Jenna if she heard it, and she nodded. We tried to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it felt like it was everywhere, surrounding us. The closer we got to shore, the quieter it became until it disappeared altogether. When we reached the dock, everything felt normal again. The usual city noises, cars driving by, people talking. We turned off the boat and sat there for a minute, still looking out at the water, trying to make sense of it. Later that night, back at my place, I tried to find anything about that second light online, some explanation for what we saw. Satellites, weather balloons, planes, anything. But there was nothing matching that exact behavior. No splash, no disturbance, no reports from anyone else. I don't know what we saw out there on the lake that night. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter, and it didn't behave like anything I've ever seen in the sky before. Just a quiet, steady light that appeared beside the North Star and then dropped straight down into the water without a sound. I keep thinking about that silence, the way the water didn't move, the low hum that came out of nowhere. It wasn't scary, not in the way a sudden noise or flashing lights would be. It was just wrong, like something was there watching but didn't want to be seen. I still look up at the North Star sometimes, half expecting to see that second light again, but it never shows. I've lived in the same small town for most of my life. It's quiet, rural, nothing fancy. Houses spread out, lots of trees, wide open fields, not many people, and not much noise except the wind and the occasional tractor. I'm in my 70s now, and I spend most days just puttering around the house or sitting on the porch with my dog, Max. He's a big mutt, half lab, half who knows what, but he's been my companion for over 10 years. There's one thing I've noticed lately, something that doesn't make much sense, and I don't really talk about it much because I figure people would just shrug it off, but I thought maybe putting it down here would help me figure it out. It started a few months back in the late afternoon on a Sunday. The sky was mostly clear, but there was this one weird cloud, low and slow, just sitting over my property. It wasn't stormy or dark, just there. Max started barking suddenly. Loud, sharp, like he was trying to warn me about something right outside the window. I looked up and down the yard, but there was nothing. No cars, no animals, nothing moving. I figured maybe it was a squirrel or a raccoon, but Max kept barking for almost 5 minutes straight, pacing by the window, teeth showing, tense as hell. That cloud stayed over the house for maybe half an hour, drifting just a little but never really moving on. And every time Max barked, it was like he was fixated on that spot in the sky. No thunder, no flashes, no planes, just that one cloud, like it was watching me or something. After it passed, Max finally stopped and settled down, but I was left feeling uneasy. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Dogs get weird sometimes. But then it happened again. A couple of weeks later, same thing. That exact kind of cloud appeared, slow and low, hovering over my property. Max started barking right away, going nuts at the window. This time I tried to get a better look. I grabbed my binoculars and watched the cloud as Max barked. It wasn't a typical cloud. It was darker than the others, kind of smooth on the edges, almost like it was shaped differently. It moved oddly, not like the wind was pushing it, but like it was holding position or drifting against the breeze. And every few seconds there was this faint, low hum. Not loud, but enough to feel it in my chest if I listened closely. Max kept barking, growling even, and he wouldn't let me open the door. I swear, he looked scared. When the cloud finally moved off, the hum stopped and Max calmed down. But the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. Over the next few weeks, I kept an eye out for it. I started noticing that anytime this kind of cloud showed up, the same size, the same shape, the same slow hovering, Max would go crazy. Barking, growling, pacing like something was out there that I couldn't see. One evening, I was sitting outside on the porch. The air was still, no wind at all. Max was beside me, calm, when suddenly he got up and stared straight ahead. I looked up and saw the cloud. It was right over the back field again, just floating there. Max barked sharply, running toward the edge of the field, but stopped a few feet away, tail down, ears back. I called him, but he just stood there, watching. Then that low hum started again. Barely audible, but definitely there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like going out there alone, so I just stayed on the porch, watching the cloud and Max. After about 20 minutes, the cloud slowly started to dissolve, like it was evaporating from the edges inward. The hum faded, and Max came back to my side. Quiet. I checked the yard. Nothing was disturbed. No footprints, no signs of animals. Just the grass and the quiet. Sometimes I'd see neighbors out walking their dogs, but none of them ever mentioned anything about these clouds or strange noises. I thought maybe it was just me and Max, some weird thing we'd picked up on. But then last week, I was at the general store talking to an old-timer named Joe. I told him about the cloud and Max's barking. He nodded slowly and said, "You're not the only one noticing it." He said a few folks out by the edge of town had seen the same kind of cloud. Slow, hovering, no rain or wind. Some said it felt wrong, like it was watching them too. That's when I really started paying attention. The next night, the cloud showed up again. Same time, same place. I grabbed my phone and recorded a bit. You can't really see much, just a dark blob against the night sky. But the sound, that low hum, comes through faintly if you listen. Max was barking the whole time, refusing to come inside. He wouldn't even eat his dinner until the cloud moved off. After that, I started noticing other odd things. My watch sometimes stopped working, the TV flickered when the cloud was near, and even my truck's radio would cut out. Just little glitches, but they all happened when that cloud was overhead. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but it happened a few more times. Each time, Max acted the same, tense, alert, aggressive. One night, the cloud stayed for hours. I sat outside, watching it, feeling more and more uncomfortable. The hum wasn't constant this time. It would come and go, sometimes dipping into silence for a few minutes, then coming back. I looked around the field, scanning for anything out of place, but it was just empty grass and trees. Then I noticed a faint light, like a tiny flicker near the ground, about 50 yards from where the cloud hovered. It wasn't a flashlight or a fire, just a steady, pale glow that moved slowly side to side. Max growled low, and I felt this tightness in my chest, like something was wrong. I thought about walking over there, but I didn't want to leave the porch. I stayed put, watching until the cloud finally drifted away and the light disappeared. Since then, I've stopped trying to explain it. I don't know what that cloud is, or why Max reacts like that. I just know that when it's here, things get strange. The silence feels heavier. The air feels thicker, and Max doesn't want to be left alone. I keep thinking about those glowing eyes dogs have sometimes when light hits them. Max's eyes don't just reflect light. When that cloud is near, they look different, like they're glowing from inside. I tell myself it's nothing, maybe an old dog's imagination, but I'm not sure anymore. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the porch late at night, I catch a glimpse of something just beyond the trees. Something watching. But when I look directly, there's nothing there. That's all I can say. It's just been happening, and I'm not sure what it means. All I know is that cloud shows up, and Max knows. And I'm left trying to make sense of it with no real answers. I started jogging early one morning just after dawn. Nothing special, just the usual route around my neighborhood. It's mostly quiet then, some cars here and there, birds waking up, the smell of dew on the grass. I liked it because it was a kind of peace before the day kicked in. I'd been doing this route for a couple of months, the same loop, same time. About halfway through the run, there's this small stretch where the street curves near a patch of trees and an empty lot. That part always felt a little darker, even in daylight, but nothing weird. Anyway, on my third or fourth run, I noticed this low humming noise. It wasn't like a car or a plane. It was more constant, a kind of mechanical buzz that didn't change pitch. It was soft, but definitely there. The weird thing was, every time I hit that curve, the humming started. I looked up, expecting to see a drone or maybe a plane, but the sky was mostly clear except for a cloud that was sitting right above the lot. I glanced directly at that cloud, but I couldn't see any source of the sound. The humming stayed steady for a few seconds, then faded as I moved past. I figured maybe it was some weird echo or something from the trees. Next day, same thing. Same spot, same humming noise. I stopped for a moment, staring up at the sky, but the cloud was still just drifting there, nothing underneath it. No helicopter, no bird, nothing visible making noise. I told myself it was probably just some electrical equipment nearby, transformers maybe, but I hadn't heard anything like it anywhere else on the route. The third day, the humming got a little louder, but it still only happened when I was under that cloud. I started checking the time on my watch. Every morning around 6:15 a.m., I'd hit that exact spot and hear the sound. After a week, I was kind of fixated on it. I'd look up before I got there, watching the cloud. It never moved much during those few minutes, just hung there like it was waiting. One morning, I brought my phone to record it. I wasn't expecting much. I thought maybe I could figure out what it was if I got a recording. I hit record just before I got to the curve and focused on the sky. The humming came through, clear as day. I kept recording for about 30 seconds, then stopped and played it back. The sound was definitely there. It was almost soothing, but there was something off about it. The next day, when I got to the spot, the humming wasn't there. The cloud was still there, same place, but the silence felt heavier than usual. I stopped and looked around, but everything seemed normal. Then, as I turned to keep running, I got this weird feeling like I was being watched. I looked over my shoulder, but there was no one there. The street was empty, quiet. I checked my phone after that run. The recording from the day before was gone, like the file wasn't in my phone at all. I swore I saved it, but when I opened the folder, nothing. I started getting paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things or losing my grip on reality from all the early mornings in the quiet. But then the humming came back the next day. Same time, same spot, same cloud. I stopped and waited, but the moment I looked away, it stopped. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. My watch would jump a few minutes ahead or behind, right around the time I hit that curve. Sometimes when I looked at my phone, the battery would drop suddenly by a noticeable amount. One morning, I swear I saw something move inside that cloud. Not a bird or a plane, but a kind of shape shifting inside it, like a shadow. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to tell my sister about it later. She laughed and said I was letting my imagination run wild. But it wasn't like that. It felt real, like something was there but didn't want me to see it directly. One night, I stayed up late trying to research anything about strange sounds or lights near my neighborhood, but nothing matched what I heard. I even drove out to the empty lot during the day, looking for any equipment or antennas that might explain the noise. Nothing. The lot was empty except for some old trees and a few piles of dirt. One morning, I decided to take a different route home from work to avoid that spot. But even then, when I got home and looked out my window, I saw the same cloud hovering over the lot, still there. I felt like I was being pulled back to that spot, like the humming was a signal or a beacon. I don't know if it was real or some kind of trick my mind played on me, but the feeling stuck. Now, whenever I run, I still find myself checking the sky around that curve, half expecting to hear the hum again, even though I'm not sure I want to. I work at a small auto repair shop in this town that doesn't get much traffic. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everyone, and not much really changes from one week to the next. Most days are just the usual: fixing brakes, oil changes, the occasional engine that's seen better days. Nothing fancy. One late afternoon, a farmer from a few miles out stopped by. He wasn't one of my regulars, so it was already a bit unusual. He looked kind of rattled, which is never a good sign. He told me he saw something over his field that afternoon. A shiny disc, he said, slowly coming down from the sky, hovering just above his crops. He was serious about it too. I've known this guy for years. He's straightforward and not the type to joke around. I nodded, tried to keep it casual, but inside I was already thinking about how ridiculous it sounded. Still, I figured it was worth noting since he was clearly shaken. Nothing like that had ever been reported around here. The next day, weird stuff started happening in the shop. First, it was small things. My digital clock flickered, then went completely dark for a minute. Then the radio I keep on for background noise started cutting out weird static noises that didn't match any station. I shrugged it off. Old wiring, probably. But then the computer I use for ordering parts and keeping records froze up twice. And the cordless phone? Completely dead battery, even though it was plugged in all night. That night, I was closing up, and as I switched off the overhead lights, the whole shop's electrical system sort of pulsed. The lights dimmed in this weird way, like someone was adjusting a dimmer really slowly, but there's no dimmer in the shop. It was unsettling. I mentioned it to a couple of regulars the next day, expecting some explanation, bad wiring, a power surge maybe, but no one had seen anything unusual. A couple days after the farmer's story, the local radio station picked up a similar report. Someone else out near the woods claimed they saw a strange glowing object hovering, no sound, just this silent light that didn't flicker or move like an airplane. The news talked about it for a bit, but then it died down. No photos, no evidence, just word of mouth. Meanwhile, my shop's electronics kept acting up. Tools that had worked fine for years would randomly stop working. My phone wouldn't get a signal anywhere near the shop, but as soon as I stepped outside, it was fine. The weirdest was the scanner I used to test car computers. It started showing glitches like data scrambling. I even caught it briefly, displaying something that looked like distorted symbols, not any error codes I recognized. One afternoon, I was standing outside by the back garage door when I noticed something odd. There was this low hum, nothing mechanical or nearby, almost like a distant transformer, but deeper and more constant. It didn't come from any machine or wire, just sort of filled the air around me. I looked up, but the sky was clear, just pale blue with a few clouds. That evening, I stayed late, trying to fix a customer's old pickup. While I was under the hood, my phone buzzed with a text from the farmer. It was just a single word, here. I called him back, but no answer. I decided to go check on his place after closing the shop. It was a few miles down a narrow dirt road, past some fields and barns. When I got there, the farm was quiet. No lights on, no signs of activity. I walked out toward the field he mentioned. The air felt heavy, almost like static electricity. The grass was still, no breeze at all. Then I saw it, or at least what looked like a faint glow, hovering just above the corn stalks. It was pale, not bright, like a dull silver disc maybe 20 feet across. It wasn't moving, just hanging there. I didn't hear anything. No engines, no buzzing, nothing. I wanted to take a picture, but my phone camera wouldn't open. It just froze on the screen. I stepped closer. The grass near me crackled like it had been rubbed with static. Then the glow started to fade, slower than any light I'd seen. It didn't blink out or flicker. It just thinned, like smoke dissipating in the air. After a few minutes, it was gone. I stood there for a while, looking around. The field was empty again, and the night felt colder. On the drive back to town, I noticed my dashboard lights dimming and flickering. The radio was completely static, even on strong stations. When I got back to the shop, everything was back to normal. Lights on, radios working fine. But the sense of something wrong didn't leave me. Over the next few days, the interference got worse. Not just electronics. Even compasses spun weirdly when I was outside near the farm. The streetlights by the shop would flicker on and off, though the power company said nothing was wrong. At night, I started hearing a low, pulsing hum again, sometimes through the walls of the shop, sometimes outside. It wasn't loud, but enough to make me uneasy. I didn't want to tell anyone. The farmer stopped returning calls, and I felt weird bringing it up around town. One night, I left the shop late, locking up as usual. On the walk to my truck, I thought I saw a shadow moving just beyond the tree line at the edge of the parking lot. I froze, staring. There was nothing there, but the feeling of being watched settled in, like someone was just out of sight, waiting. I got in the truck, started it up, the radio was dead again. I looked back once. Nothing. That weekend, I decided to take a break and head home early. Driving out of town, the sky was clear, the stars out. But as I passed the farm, a faint light blinked on near the barn, low and steady, not like any normal porch light. Then it disappeared. At home, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there wasn't gone. The electronics at the shop finally stopped acting up a few days later, just as quietly as it had started. No one else talked about the lights or the strange hums after that. I keep thinking about that shiny disc the farmer saw, how the whole town's electronics seemed to glitch around that area, and the way the light just vanished. I don't know what it was. I just know it felt like something was watching, and it wasn't about to say hello. I was camping alone by this lake up in the mountains, not some fancy spot, just a clearing I found after a long hike. I set up my tent a little ways from the water's edge, nothing special, just the usual: sleeping bag, small stove, some canned food. The whole area was quiet except for the usual bugs and the occasional splash of a fish or something jumping. I had been out there for 2 days, mostly just hiking and reading. No cell service, no other people for miles. It was peaceful, exactly what I wanted. The first night was normal enough. I went to sleep pretty early since I'd been hiking all day. The air was cool but not cold, and the sounds of the lake and the woods were just what I expected. But when I woke up, something was off. It was still dark outside, maybe just before dawn, but I couldn't get back to sleep. I stepped out of the tent to stretch, and that's when I saw it. The sand along the shore, right where I had set up, had all these impressions. Smooth, oval-shaped depressions in the sand, arranged in a loose spiral pattern. At first, I thought maybe an animal had been there, but these weren't paw prints or anything like that. They were clean, evenly spaced, and oddly shaped, like someone pressed large eggs into the sand over and over, circling inward. I walked closer, trying to figure out what made them. There were dozens, maybe 100 or more. None of them looked natural. The impressions were smooth and deep enough to be noticeable, but there was no sign of footprints or drag marks nearby. No broken branches, no other disturbances. I looked around for a moment, expecting to see someone else's campsite or maybe a group of kids who'd come through, but the whole area was empty. No tents, no campfires, no trash, nothing but me and those strange marks. I walked back to my tent, trying to shake off the weird feeling. Maybe I'd imagined something, or maybe a deer or some other animal had done, but it didn't add up. Nothing I knew of made marks like that. I spent the morning hiking along the lake's edge, keeping an eye out for any other signs, but I didn't find anything else unusual, just the same quiet woods and still water. That afternoon, I went back to the spot to take a closer look at the impressions. The sun was higher now, and the sand had started to dry out. The impressions were still there, perfectly preserved. I even tried pressing my hand into one. It was smooth and cool, almost like wet plaster, but just sand. What bothered me was how perfect the pattern was, not random, not messy, like someone had carefully placed those ovals in a spiral shape. I took some pictures, even though I wasn't sure why. Part of me wanted proof if I ever told someone, and part of me just wanted to understand what I was seeing. That night, I barely slept. Every sound around the tent seemed louder, and I kept thinking about those marks on the sand. At one point, I thought I heard something moving outside the tent, but when I peeked out, there was nothing. No animals, no people, no flashes of light. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange, like something was pressing on my chest or squeezing my head. I couldn't quite explain it. I got up and walked down to the shore again. The impressions were gone. Not like they were filled in by the wind or washed away by water. They just weren't there anymore. The sand was smooth and untouched. I checked the rest of the area for footprints or anything that might explain it, but still nothing. I tried to tell myself I must have dreamed the whole thing, but I knew I hadn't. I was wide awake when I first saw them. The pictures on my phone showed the impressions clearly. I kept looking around the campsite, feeling like I was being watched. The woods were still silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That day, I packed up early. As I was hiking back toward the trailhead, I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see something moving between the trees, but there was nothing. When I got home, I checked my photos again. The impressions looked real, but there was no explanation for how they got there or why they disappeared. I've camped a lot in my life, and I've never seen anything like it. No footprints, no signs of other people, no animals that could have done it. Just those smooth oval impressions in a spiral. I don't know what I saw or why. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was real. But it doesn't make sense, and I haven't been back since. I was out for my usual morning jog, the kind I do almost every day before work. That morning was different, though. Thick fog had rolled in overnight, so everything was muted, like the world had been wrapped in a gray blanket. The streets were empty except for me, and the usual noises of the neighborhood felt softened, almost swallowed up by the mist. I was about halfway through my route when I came up on the old stone bridge near the river. Uh, it's not a big bridge or anything, just a couple lanes over a small creek, but it always felt a little eerie, especially in the fog. The stone is covered with moss and the creek water runs dark and slow beneath it. I'd passed under that bridge hundreds of times before, never thinking much about it. That morning, as I got closer, I started feeling this weird pressure in my ears, like when you're on a plane going through turbulence and your ears pop. But I was standing still, and it wasn't the usual pinch or discomfort. It was stronger, more intense, and it didn't go away. It was almost like my head was underwater, or like someone was slowly tightening a clamp around my skull. I stopped right under the bridge, trying to shake it off, hoping it was just some weird sinus thing from the cold air. I put my hands over my ears and breathed through my mouth, but it didn't help. The pressure just stayed there, low but persistent, and it started to make me dizzy. I glanced around, expecting maybe some loud noise or construction or something, but the fog was thick and the street was completely silent. No cars, no people, no birds, just this dull, heavy quiet. Then I noticed the ground right next to the sidewalk under the bridge. There was this patch of frost, perfectly circular, maybe a little bigger than a dinner plate. I'm pretty familiar with the area, and I knew for a fact it hadn't been there when I ran past that spot earlier that morning. The air was cold but not freezing, and the rest of the ground was just damp, no frost anywhere else. This patch looked fresh, like it had just appeared. I stared at it, confused. It was like a perfect white ring on the dark asphalt. No footprints leading to it, no tire marks, nothing. Just this weird, cold circle sitting there alone. I looked back up at the bridge and felt the pressure in my ears spike again. I wanted to move, but my legs felt heavy, almost numb. The fog seemed to close in around me, and the silence grew thicker. I checked my phone to see what time it was. 6:18 a.m. No messages, no missed calls. But the screen flickered for a second, like the brightness was adjusting on its own. Then it went back to normal. I thought maybe I was just imagining things or getting overheated from the jog, so I shook my head and started walking again. The pressure in my ears stayed, though it eased off a bit as I got away from the bridge. About 100 feet down the road, I heard something. A soft tapping sound, like someone drumming their fingers on metal. I stopped and looked around, but the fog swallowed everything. No cars, no people. I called out hello, but my voice sounded muffled, like it was coming from far away. The tapping stopped instantly. I told myself it was probably Ranch hitting a street sign or something small like that, and kept moving. Still, the feeling of being watched settled in behind me. I checked over my shoulder a few times, but the fog made it impossible to see much. When I reached the park at the end of my run, things got even stranger. I pulled out my water bottle from my bag, and the cap wouldn't budge. I twisted and twisted, but it felt like it was sealed shut tight, almost glued. After a minute of struggling, it popped open, and a sudden cold rush of air came out, like the bottle had somehow been chilled all night, even though I had left it inside my warm apartment. I shrugged it off, trying to focus on finishing my jog, but my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. The message was blank. I checked the screen carefully. No characters, no spaces, nothing. Just a completely empty message. I deleted it, thinking maybe it was a glitch, but then my phone screen flashed black for a second. When it came back on, my battery was suddenly at 20%, even though I had charged it fully the night before. I decided to head home. On the way back, the pressure in my ears came back again, but stronger. It was like being underwater, but also like a really loud noise was trying to push through my skull. I put my hands over my ears and slowed down, but it didn't get better. I passed the bridge again, this time from the other side. The frost patch was gone. I stopped and looked around. The fog felt thinner now, the sun starting to rise and burn it off. But there was something else. On the opposite side of the street, near a clump of trees, I thought I saw a shape, tall, thin, standing perfectly still. It wasn't a person, not really. Too tall, too still. I blinked, and it was gone. I got home and locked the door behind me. I spent the day feeling off, like my head was full of static. My ears kept popping on and off, and every so often I'd catch a glimpse of that circular frost patch in the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I checked my phone again before bed. No messages, no glitches. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there that morning. Watching, waiting under that bridge. And I keep wondering what that frost patch was, how it appeared and disappeared without a trace, and why my ears felt like they were about to burst for no reason at all. I haven't gone jogging under that bridge since. The train stopped suddenly. Not the slow kind of stop where the brakes ease you into the station, but a hard, jerky stop that threw a few people forward in their seats. I was sitting by the window on the right side of the car, my earbuds still in, but the sudden stop pulled me out of whatever playlist I was half listening to. The wheels screeched and the lights flickered, dimming for a second before snapping back on. We were on a flat stretch of track out in the middle of nowhere. At least it felt that way. Nothing but fields on either side, no houses or streetlights for miles. The kind of place where you expect the train to be moving smoothly at a steady clip, not to just come to a halt for no obvious reason. At first, there was just silence, the usual murmurs and shuffling from passengers wondering what happened. Then someone looked out the window to the left, pointed, and a few heads turned. I followed their gaze and saw it. About a half mile off, hovering maybe 30 feet above the ground, was something I can't really describe. It was a shape, sort of round, but not perfectly so, like a flattened disc. There were no blinking lights, no tail lights, or anything you'd expect from a helicopter or drone. It just hovered there, still, with a faint glow, kind of a dull white light, not bright enough to shine, just enough to be visible against the darkening sky. It didn't move closer or away, and there was no sound. Usually a helicopter or any kind of aircraft buzzing that low would have some noise, even if it was just a faint whir. But this thing was completely silent. The air around it didn't seem to move, no wind or anything. It just hung there, motionless. Some people on the train started taking out their phones, aiming cameras toward the window. A couple of passengers whispered about calling the authorities. I wasn't sure what to think, but there was this strange tension in the car, like everyone was waiting for it to do something or for something to happen. Then the power flickered again. The overhead lights dimmed and brightened twice more, and the hum of the train engines got quieter, like the whole system was struggling. The conductor's voice came over the speakers, calm but with a hint of irritation. Folks, we're experiencing a temporary power issue. We're checking it out. Please stay in your seats. That was when I noticed something else. The conductor, who was visible through the glass door leading to the front of the car, was staring out the windshield, but his eyes looked off, like he was trying to see something that wasn't there. He rubbed his face, blinked hard, and shook his head. A few passengers near the front of the car called out, saying they could see it too. But when the conductor leaned forward and looked again, he said over the intercom, "There's nothing out there. Just trees and fields, no signs of anything unusual." That felt weird, almost like he was refusing to acknowledge what we all clearly saw. I kept watching the shape. It didn't change, didn't blink or move, but after maybe 10 minutes it started to fade, like someone was slowly turning down a dimmer switch. Then it vanished altogether. After that, the power returned fully, the engines kicked back in, and the train lurched forward. Everyone was quiet. People glanced around, like checking if anyone else noticed the same thing. I kept looking at the spot where it had been hovering, half expecting it to come back. But the fields were just empty, and the sky was clear except for a few stars. Later, when we got to the next station, I overheard some passengers talking about the incident, speculating on what it might have been. I asked one of the conductors waiting on the platform, and he shrugged, said maybe a weather balloon or something. But the first conductor never mentioned it again. His face looked tense whenever I saw him, like he wanted to say something but didn't. I kept thinking about how everything stopped. The train, the power, the sounds. How the shape just hung there, quiet and still, watching us as if it belonged to that empty stretch of land. I don't know what it was, and I don't think anyone else does either. But something about that night made me keep glancing out the window, hoping to see it again and wondering why the man driving the train acted like it wasn't real. We'd been at the cabin for a few days, just the three of us. Me, my wife, and our son, Jake. It's out in the middle of nowhere, really remote. No cell service, just the kind of place where you drive for miles through dense woods to get there. We liked it for the quiet, away from everything. The plan was to disconnect, relax, and let Jake run around without worry. The first couple of nights were normal, nothing weird. Just the usual sounds, crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But the third night, something happened that I've been trying to figure out ever since. We were sitting outside around the fire pit. Jake was roasting marshmallows, and my wife and I were just talking, sipping some coffee. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright because there's no light pollution out there. It was peaceful, exactly what we came for. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my wife pointed toward the trees on the far edge of the clearing and said, "What's that?" I looked where she was pointing, toward the thick line of firs and pines that bordered the cabin. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, slowly, a light appeared, a small, glowing sphere rising just above the treetops. It wasn't like any flashlight or lantern. It was smooth, perfectly round, and emitted a soft, steady light that was white but kind of bluish at the edges. The sphere moved up, inch by inch, about 50 feet above us, just hovering there. There was no noise. No buzzing, no humming, nothing. I swear I strained to hear something, but it was completely silent except for the crackling of the fire behind me. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing things. My wife looked just as confused, and Jake stopped mid-toast with his marshmallow, staring wide-eyed. The sphere didn't change shape or size, it just hung there, still. We didn't move or speak for maybe a minute. I felt my stomach knot up, not in a panic, but in that slow, creeping kind of unease. The kind where your body wants to run, but your mind is stuck trying to make sense of what it's seeing. Then, without warning, it shot straight up, like a bullet. I mean, really fast, faster than anything I've ever seen. It vanished into the sky in a blink, leaving no trail, no noise, nothing. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. We all just sat there, stunned. I looked at my watch. Only about 30 seconds had passed since it appeared. But something felt off, like time wasn't right. After a moment, Jake whispered, "Did you see that?" My wife nodded, but she looked pale. "What was that?" I had no answer. Later, inside the cabin, we tried to shake it off, but the weirdness didn't end that night. The next day, Jake found some strange marks in the dirt near the cabin's edge. They were circular, about 2 feet wide, like something had been pressed into the ground. No footprints, no signs of a person or animal dragging something, just these perfectly round indentations, spaced unevenly, leading toward the woods. We thought maybe a heavy branch fell or something, but the circles were too precise, and there was no broken wood around. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Something outside felt different. I went to the window and looked out. The forest was still, but in the distance, I saw a faint light flickering, like a glow behind the trees, too small and too steady to be a campfire. I kept watching, and it moved slowly along the tree line, just below the canopy, never breaking through the branches. It didn't blink or change color, just moved in this smooth, gliding way. I called my wife quietly, but when she looked, the light was gone. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but I didn't feel right going back to bed. By the third night, the air felt heavy, like something was watching. We all stayed close together, the fire burning brighter than before. Then, again, that sphere appeared. Same place, same silent rise above the trees. Only this time, it stayed longer, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I noticed it pulse gently, the light thickening and thinning in waves, almost like it was breathing. Jake whispered, "It's watching us." I wanted to say it wasn't, that it was just a weird light. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. When it finally shot up and disappeared again, my wife said, "Let's pack up tomorrow." We didn't talk much after that, just packed silently the next day. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the sphere again. but the sky was empty. I don't know what we saw or why it was there. But something about those nights made the woods feel less like home and more like a place you're not supposed to be. It's been months since then, and sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I still see a faint glow just beyond the trees outside my window. The fire started on a Tuesday, just after noon. We were on the outskirts of a national forest, the kind of place where the trees get tall and thick enough that you can't see the sky most of the time. I was part of a small wildfire crew, just 6 of us, sent out from the nearest station to help contain this blaze before it spread to the bigger towns. It was the kind of work where you get used to being covered in soot and sweat and the smell of smoke hanging in the air all day. We'd been on the fire line for maybe 4 hours, hiking in and setting up hoses and digging fire breaks. The wind was shifting a bit, which made everyone nervous. It wasn't a huge fire, but in that kind of dry forest, it could get out of hand fast. We were working near a ridge, and the smoke was thick enough that it blocked out the sun. Everything looked orange and hazy, like a permanent dusk. Around 7 p.m., just as the sky was starting to darken, someone on the crew, Jesse, I think, called out that there was a light in the smoke above the ridge. At first, I thought it was one of the helicopters or planes that come to drop water or retardant. But the helicopters had stopped flying hours earlier, and this wasn't a blinking light or a searchlight. The light was bright, white, and steady. It looked like a giant flashlight beam, but it wasn't cutting through the smoke in a cone like a spotlight would. Instead, it was just a glowing orb, maybe 10 feet across, hanging in the middle of the thick smoke a few hundred yards away. It moved slowly, descending from higher up the ridge and then stopping in place. No one spoke for a second. We all just stared. The smoke around the light twisted and curled like it was reacting to the glow, but the fire itself kept burning around the edges. We tried to figure out what it was. Jesse swore it wasn't a drone or anything from the Forest Service, but none of us knew what else to think. The light stayed there for maybe 5 or 6 minutes, just hovering without moving. It didn't pulse or flicker. It was almost unnervingly calm given the chaos of the fire around it. Then, after those minutes passed, it started to rise again, slowly at first, then faster, until it vanished into the thick smoke above the ridge. That's when the weirdest thing happened. We noticed that the fire below, in a nearly perfect circle around where the light had hovered, was completely out. The ring was about 50 feet across, and inside it the forest looked untouched by the fire. No burnt leaves, no blackened trees, nothing. Just a clean, crisp line separating the burned ground from the unburned. We checked it over and over, poking at the edges, expecting it to smolder or flare back up. But nothing. The fire had stopped dead. Like someone had drawn an invisible boundary it wasn't allowed to cross. We radioed back to base to report it, but the static was thick and garbled, like the radio was having trouble getting through. When someone finally answered, they told us to hold position and wait for the night crew to arrive. We set up camp near the edge of that ring, still looking out at the glowing orange sky and the dense smoke. The crew was quiet, more serious than usual. Nobody really joked or tried to explain what we'd seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that low hum under the crackling of the fire, almost like a distant engine idling somewhere. But there was nothing else out there except us and the forest. In the early morning hours, I got up and walked over to the fire ring again. The air inside it was cooler, and the smell of smoke was faint, almost like the fire had never been there. I noticed something else then. The trees just inside the ring looked different. They weren't burnt, but they also weren't quite normal. The bark was smoother, and the leaves had a slightly darker green than the rest of the forest. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I told the crew, but no one else seemed to notice. Maybe they were too tired or just wanted to move on. The rest of the day went by slowly. The fire crews that arrived later started reinforcing the fire breaks, but the fire didn't cross that circle at all. We spent hours making sure the line held. When we finally left, the smoke had cleared a bit. I looked back one last time at that perfect circle. It stood out, stark and strange, against the rest of the blackened forest. Since then, I've checked satellite images and fire reports from that day, but no one else seems to have noticed the ring or the light. The official story is just a normal wildfire not contained by good work and weather changes. I'm not so sure. Sometimes when I'm outside at night, I swear I hear a faint hum far off in the distance, like a machine running quietly just beyond the trees. And every now and then, I catch a glimpse of something moving in the shadows at the edge of the forest. Not a person, not an animal, but something else, watching. I don't know what it was that night, but whatever it was, it didn't want that fire to burn through its territory. I left that forest behind, but that perfect circle stayed with me. I was out on the lake alone one early evening in late September. The light was fading fast, but there was still enough left to see the tree line and the hills beyond it. I'd been kayaking for a couple of hours, just drifting, not pushing too hard, trying to unwind after a long week. The lake's usually quiet around that time, just the occasional bird or the splash of a fish. I was paddling near the middle of the lake, not close to shore, when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was a shadow or maybe a log floating beneath the surface, but it moved, smooth and slow, gliding just under the water, maybe 6 or 7 feet away from me. The shape was wide, almost too wide to be any kind of fish or animal I knew. It was metallic looking, but not shiny like a boat or a buoy, more like matte metal, perfectly smooth and dark gray. It didn't have any markings or features I could make out. No fins, no eyes, nothing that made it look alive. What really got me was how the water around it stayed perfectly still. There were no ripples, no waves, nothing. Usually, anything moving under the water surface, even a slow-moving fish, leaves some kind of disturbance. But this thing didn't. The water was glassy calm, and it just slid silently beneath me. I stopped paddling right then and just stared. The sun had dipped lower, and the light was dimming fast. The shape didn't change course or speed, it just kept moving smoothly in a straight line, maybe a few feet below the surface. I was close enough to hear something, or think I did. It wasn't a sound like splashing or bubbles. It was more like a very low hum, but so faint that I wasn't sure if I imagined it. I'd never heard anything like it before, and I'm not usually spooked by weird stuff in nature. The weirdest part was that I couldn't tell how big it was exactly. The shape was wide, but it seemed to stretch out of view in both directions, like it was longer than I could see. But it never came closer or moved away. It just glided there, parallel to my kayak. I felt this pressure in my chest, like my heart was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't move or speak. My hands just rested on the paddle. The water was cold, but I didn't feel cold, more like a dull numbness. After what felt like several minutes, I blinked and looked away for a second, trying to get my mind off it. When I looked back, the shape was gone. Just disappeared. No splash, no waves, no sign it was ever there. I scanned the surface for any sign of it, but the lake looked completely normal. The water reflected the darkening sky, the last light slipping behind the hills. I paddled slowly toward the shore, trying to shake off the weird feeling. The whole way back, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shape following me, but it never showed up again. When I got back to my truck and started driving home, I noticed my phone had no signal. That was normal around the lake, but I tried to call my girlfriend anyway. No luck. Later that night, I checked every video and photo I'd taken on my phone that day. There were a few from earlier, but nothing near the time I saw the shape. I even looked through the footage on the kayak's small camera I sometimes strap on. Nothing unusual there either. I told a couple of friends, but they joked it was probably a log or a big fish. I wanted to believe that too. But I keep thinking about how the water didn't ripple, and how the shape just vanished without a trace. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can see that dark, smooth form sliding beneath the water, perfectly still, silently watching. I don't know what it was, and I'm not sure I want to find out. But it felt like whatever it was, it knew I was there. And that's what sticks with me the most. I was out in the middle of nowhere, about 20 miles from the nearest town, just me and my backpack. I'd gone camping for a couple of days, mostly to get away from everything. No signal, no people, just the forest and sky. I'm not an expert or anything, but I like filming the stars at night. I brought my old DSLR on a tripod and spent a few hours capturing time lapses and long exposures. That night, the sky was clear, the kind of dark that feels almost heavy when you look up. No moon, just stars everywhere. I set the camera facing the open patch above a small clearing near my tent and let it run. The plan was to check the footage in the morning and see what I got. I was sitting by the fire just thinking about how quiet it was, the kind of silence that presses in, you know? There were the usual sounds of the woods, distant owls, a couple of rustles I assumed were raccoons or something, but otherwise, nothing out of the ordinary. After a while, I decided to call it a night. I put the camera away, zipped up my tent, and laid down to sleep. The night passed like any other, quiet and cold. The next morning, I grabbed the camera and started looking through the footage. I wasn't expecting much, just a bunch of stars moving slowly across the sky, maybe a shooting star or two. But when I reached a frame about 2 hours after I started recording, something weird caught my eye. There was a tall figure standing behind where I'd set the tripod. It was barely visible, just a dark shape, but it was definitely human-shaped. It looked like it was standing still, facing away from the camera, maybe looking up at the sky. The weird part was there was no sound in the footage, no rustling, no movement from the figure, just completely silent and still. I went frame by frame hoping to catch it moving or blinking or something. But the very next frame, it was gone. No movement, no disappearing fade, just gone like it was never there. I rewound and played it again, trying to catch any signs I'd missed. I checked the rest of the footage for anything similar. Nothing else showed up. No strange lights, no shadows, no noises, just that one frame with the figure. I started wondering if it was a glitch or some trick of the light, but the shape was too clear for that. It looked like a person standing there, tall and still. After staring at it for a while, I realized I hadn't heard any footsteps or anything unusual the night before. If someone was really standing behind me, I would have noticed. I mean, I was alone out there, but still, I was awake enough to hear animals, the fire crackling, something. That's when things started feeling off. I went through my memory, trying to remember what I was doing around the time that frame was captured. I was certain I'd been alone, and I never heard a thing. I decided to check outside the tent, just to be sure. The ground was undisturbed, no footprints or signs that anyone else had been near my camp. It made no sense. Who or what was that? I packed up early and started hiking back to my car. The trail felt different, like I was being watched, but every time I looked around, there was nothing. Just trees and the quiet forest. When I got back home, I checked the footage again on a bigger screen, but the figure never made sense to me. It didn't move, didn't make noise, and vanished without a trace. I thought about deleting it, but I couldn't. It's like the moment was frozen in time, but I'm still not sure what it means. I've gone back to that spot a few times since, but I never saw anything like it again. No strange figures, no unexplained sounds, just normal camping. I don't know if someone was there that night or if it was something else, but the way it appeared for just one frame, so still and silent, and then disappeared, I haven't figured that part out. I was driving home late one night on this stretch of highway that cuts through mostly empty forest. It's not the busiest road by any means, and it's the kind of place where you don't really see other cars after dark unless you get lucky or unlucky. I was on my way back from visiting a friend, probably around 11:30 or midnight. The air was cold and thick with fog, so thick that the headlights barely cut through it more than a few feet ahead. I was driving slow because visibility sucked, and honestly, it was already making me a little uneasy. There's something about dense fog at night that messes with your head. Everything feels quieter, and shadows look like they're moving just beyond your sight. I kept telling myself it was nothing, and tried to focus on the road. Then, about 10 miles in, I saw taillights ahead. A pair of red lights, just sitting there in the fog. At first, I thought maybe the car in front was pulled over or broken down. But the weird thing was the height of those lights. They were way too high, at least 20 feet off the ground. I kept looking, thinking maybe it was a trick of the fog or the angle, but no matter how I adjusted my eyes, they stayed up there, floating. I blinked a few times and slowed down even more. I tried to see the vehicle itself, but the fog was thick enough to completely obscure anything but the lights. No shape, no headlights, no reflections, just those two red dots hovering in place. I tapped the brakes and followed cautiously, keeping a good distance. My headlights were on low beam because the fog was bad, but I glanced down and flipped my brights on for a second, hoping to get a better look. As soon as I did, the lights vanished, just gone. No flicker, no slow fade. They disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. I froze for a moment, confused and a little freaked out. I looked around, but there was nothing else in the fog. No other cars, no street signs, nothing. Just empty highway and the thick, gray-white haze. I slowed to a crawl and flipped the brights off, trying to see if maybe the lights would come back. I watched the spot where they'd been, but nothing. The fog stayed thick and the road ahead looked normal, except for the feeling that I'd just seen something I couldn't explain. I started to wonder if I'd been hallucinating, but my hands weren't shaking and I was wide awake. I pulled over to the side of the road for a second just to catch my breath and figure out what was going on. The silence was heavy, no birds, no crickets, no cars, just that fog settling like a blanket over everything. I looked up at the trees lining the road and saw nothing unusual. No lights, no movement, no reflections. I checked my phone, no signal, which wasn't surprising this far out. After a few minutes, I decided to get back on the road and keep going. As I drove, I kept glancing around, expecting maybe those red lights to come back or something else to show up, but nothing did, just fog and trees. About 20 minutes later, the fog started to thin a little. My visibility improved and the road felt less oppressive. I was getting closer to the outskirts of town. Then, out of nowhere, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance. A faint glow, not red this time, more like a pale yellowish light hovering low over the treetops. I squinted and slowed down again. The light was small, but it didn't move or flicker. It just stayed there like a candle flame against the darkness. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. I tried flashing my brights again, but the light didn't vanish this time. Instead, it just stayed put, steady and silent. I felt this weird mix of curiosity and unease. I wanted to pull over and get a closer look, but something held me back. The night, the fog, the way that light didn't behave like any car or street light I'd ever seen. It didn't feel right. I kept driving, and after a few minutes, the light slowly faded away into the dark. The road opened up and the fog cleared more. I finally got back to a place with signal, called my friend to tell her I was almost home, and tried to push the whole thing out of my head. But even now, when I'm alone at night or when the fog rolls in thick, I think about those lights, the way the taillights floated way too high, then vanished the second I flashed my brights. The strange yellow glow just hovering like it belonged to something not from around here. I don't have any real answers. I don't even know if what I saw was a trick of the light or my mind. All I know is that night on that foggy road felt different. And even though I made it home fine, I keep wondering what else might be out there, just out of sight. I was working a late shift on the interstate, just north of the city. It was one of those cold, clear nights where you can see forever, but the wind was blowing hard, enough to shake the patrol car a little when I was parked on the shoulder. I was doing my usual rounds, just keeping an eye out for anything sketchy, when something caught my eye up ahead. There was this bright light way up high, just above the highway. At first I thought it was a helicopter or maybe a drone, but it wasn't moving. Not at all. I scanned the sky for any sign of aircraft or anything. No blinking lights, no sound, nothing. Just that single, steady white light hanging in the air. It didn't flicker or change color, just stayed there, fixed. The wind was strong enough that if it was a helicopter, it'd be rocking or shifting position at least a little, but this light was perfectly still. I pulled over, cut the engine, and got out to get a better look. The highway was mostly empty that night, just a few cars here and there, but nobody else seemed to notice the light. I reached for the radio to report what I was seeing. Tried the usual channels, but the signal kept cutting out. Static. No response from dispatch. I flipped the radio off and on, checked the antenna. Nothing. I tried my backup radio, same thing. Dead air. It felt weird because the radio always worked out here, even on the edges of the county. I kept watching the light, hoping it would move or at least blink, but it just stayed there, silent and steady, against the black sky. The highway lights below flickered in the wind, but the light up there didn't. It was like it was anchored in place. After about 15 minutes, I started feeling uneasy. The cold wind was making my eyes water, but the light didn't seem affected. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. It didn't seem like any aircraft I'd ever seen or heard about. Not a plane, not a drone, not a weather balloon. I called dispatch again, voice steady, but no reply. Then I tried my phone. No service. That was strange, since I usually had at least some signal on this stretch. I stepped back into the car to check my maps and see if there were any reports or alerts, but the screen wouldn't load. The phone kept saying no connection. I kept glancing back at the light. After 30 minutes, a couple of cars passed by, but the drivers didn't slow down or even seem to look up. I wondered if anyone else was seeing it, but I figured if they did, they'd be calling it in or freaking out. The cold settled deeper in my bones. I rolled up the window to block the wind, but kept watching through the glass. The light didn't change, and my radios still didn't work. I even tried the emergency channel, hoping for anything, but nothing. About 45 minutes in, I noticed something else. The light's brightness had started to dim a little, just barely, like someone was turning it down slowly. It wasn't a quick fade, more like a slow drift toward darkness. I blinked, checked again, and it was definitely dimmer. Right then, the wind picked up, stronger than before. Usually, if a helicopter or drone was up there, it'd have to fight that wind. But the light didn't move an inch, no wobble or sway. It was like it was locked in place by something unseen. Then, all of a sudden, it vanished. Not faded or blinked out, gone completely in less than a second. One moment it was there, just barely dimmer. The next it was just black sky. No flash, no trail, nothing. I sat there for a long minute, not quite sure what to do. Tried the radio again, still dead. Tried the phone, no signal. The wind was still howling outside. The highway lights flickered in the distance, normal. I started the car, feeling a knot in my stomach, and radioed dispatch one last time. This time, the signal came through clear. I told them about the light, asked if they'd seen anything on radar or had reports from other officers. They said no, nothing unusual. I didn't tell them about the radios going dead or the phone losing signal. They'd think I was messing with them. I stayed out there for another hour scanning the sky. The wind died down a bit, but no other lights showed up. The rest of the night went back to normal. Routine traffic, no emergencies, no strange sightings. When my shift ended, I drove home, still thinking about that light. I kept looking up at the sky, half expecting to see it again, but it never came back. I don't know what I saw that night. Something wasn't right, but there was no clear explanation. Just a light hanging in the sky, silent and still, then gone. And for a while, no way to call it in or get help. That's it. Just a weird, quiet thing that happened on a cold night while I was watching over the highway. I was hiking alone in the mountains, trying to clear my head after a rough week. Nothing special about the trail, just some well-marked paths winding through the forest, and then up to this pass where you get a pretty good view of the valley below. I'd been hiking these parts a couple of times before, so I knew the route well enough not to worry about getting lost. I was halfway up, just past the tree line, when I stopped to check my compass. It was one of those basic models I got years ago. Nothing fancy, just to make sure I stayed oriented. That's when I noticed something weird. The needle started spinning, fast and erratic. It didn't settle in any direction, just whirled around like it had lost its mind. I stood there for a minute, expecting it to calm down, but it kept going. I figured maybe it was just some magnetic interference, or maybe I had bumped it the wrong way. I looked around for any metal signs or power lines, but I was way too far out for that. Just trees and rocks and the open sky. I put the compass down and turned around to keep going, and that's when I saw them. 3 lights. hovering just above the tree line, maybe 100 feet off the ground. They were arranged in a perfect triangle, like someone had drawn lines connecting them in the air. The lights themselves weren't bright, more like dim orange glows, and they didn't flicker or blink. They just moved silently, gliding slowly from left to right. I stopped dead. The air felt suddenly heavier, colder, though there was no wind. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. No blinking, no sound, no signs of an engine or anything mechanical. I even checked to see if it was a drone, but the size and the way it moved didn't make sense for that. The three lights kept moving steadily, as if they were watching or following the ridge. I stepped back a little, trying not to stare too long. The compass was still spinning in my hand, completely out of control. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but there was no signal out here. The screen showed no service, like always in these remote spots. I thought about calling someone to tell them what I was seeing, but the silence around me made it feel pointless. The lights stayed in that formation, moving slowly, perfectly synchronized. There was no sound, no movement in the trees below them, no animals reacting or running away. It was like they didn't belong here at all. I kept watching for what felt like maybe 10 minutes, but I didn't hear or see anything else. Eventually, the lights drifted higher and started to fade, slowly disappearing into the night sky. The compass in my hand finally stopped spinning and pointed north like it was supposed to. I waited a few more minutes, just standing there, half expecting the lights to come back or some other sign. But the forest was quiet, normal, like nothing had happened. When I got back to my car a couple hours later, I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was probably a weird reflection or some kind of military exercise I didn't know about. But the compass spinning, that part didn't fit. And the way those lights moved, so calm and controlled, that wasn't anything I'd ever seen. I still don't know what I saw that night at the pass. I keep thinking about the silence and how those lights didn't make a sound, didn't leave a trace, just glided through the dark. The compass spinning out of control before I even saw them, like something was messing with the instruments or with me. I didn't tell many people, mostly because it sounds crazy when you say it out loud. But it's been on my mind since. Something was there, just beyond the trees, watching or passing through. I just don't know why. I was finishing up my rounds at the office building around 3 a.m., just the usual night shift janitor stuff, emptying trash, wiping down surfaces, checking the restrooms. The place was quiet except for the hum of the AC and the occasional creak of the building settling. I liked the night shift in some ways. No interruptions, no boss breathing down my neck. Just me and the silence. I was on the 4th floor when I decided to take a quick break. Walked over to one of the windows that faced out toward the hills about 5 miles away. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a cloud catching the moonlight, but it wasn't moving like a cloud. It was this huge, dark shape hanging in the sky above the hills, slowly spinning. It wasn't like any plane or helicopter I'd ever seen. No lights, no blinking signals, no noise. Just this silent, massive form turning in place. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was seeing things or my mind was playing tricks on me from being up so late. But it didn't go away. The shape stayed there, slow and steady, spinning almost hypnotically. I couldn't make out any details. It was just a silhouette against the night sky, big enough to block a bunch of stars behind it, but perfectly still. No flashes or anything. It wasn't moving closer or farther, just spinning slowly over those hills. I tried to call someone on my cell, text a friend or something, but my signal was weak out there and the phone kept cutting out. It was weird because I usually get decent reception from that window. I stood there for a few minutes, watching. I don't know why I didn't feel like running or screaming. It was more like confusion and this creeping sense of something being off. I walked back from the window and kept working, but I kept glancing over my shoulder toward those hills. Every time I looked, the shape was still there, spinning at the same pace, silent and dark. Later on, I went down to the break room for a soda. When I checked my phone again, the battery was lower than I remembered, and the signal was still spotty. I went back to the window around 4 a.m. The shape was gone. The next night, I came in hoping maybe it was just a weird trick of the light or something passing through the sky. But the moment I looked out that same window, there it was again. Same spot, same slow spin. No lights, no sound. I decided to stay by the window for a while. The building was empty except for me, and I felt more alone than usual. The thing was huge, bigger than any aircraft I could imagine, but it didn't behave like one. No noise, no blinking lights, no movement toward or away. At one point, I noticed a faint, almost imperceptible vibration in the air. It wasn't a sound, but more like a pressure against my skin. I couldn't tell if it was from outside or just me imagining things. I kept watching as the shape spun, trying to find any detail, a window, an engine, lights, but it was just a dark blur. I left the window to finish my shift, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. On the third night, the shape was still there again, same time, same place. This time, though, when I glanced away for a moment and then looked back, the shape was gone, not moved or flown away, just vanished. I felt something shift inside me, like I'd been holding my breath and didn't realize it. The rest of the night, everything felt different. The building seemed colder, the shadows sharper. I walked out to my car after my shift, glancing back at the hills one last time. Nothing. It's been a few weeks now. The shape hasn't come back. I don't know if it was real or some kind of hallucination from too many late nights and not enough sleep. But sometimes when I'm near that window, I swear I can still feel that quiet pressure in the air, like something is just beyond sight, spinning slowly, waiting. I was walking home from my late shift at the diner, taking the usual route through the neighborhood by the edge of town. It was just after midnight, quiet and cold, the kind of night where the streetlights flicker a little and everything feels stretched thin. I had my headphones in, music low, mostly to keep the weird sounds of the wind from freaking me out too much. I guess I was half listening when I noticed the air above the field next to the road wasn't right. There was this shape, just hanging there maybe 20 feet off the ground. It looked like a big metallic thing, but it wasn't like any helicopter or drone I've ever seen. No lights blinking, no sound at all. Just this smooth, silvery thing, kind of oval shaped, but not perfect. Almost like it had dents or panels, but none of it reflecting the streetlights properly. I stopped walking, pulled one earbud out, and stared. It didn't move. It just hovered, and the weirdest part was how silent it was. Even with the wind blowing, I couldn't hear a single sound from it. No motors, no hum, nothing. Just the wind around it. I pulled my phone out to try and get a picture, but the screen kept flickering and then went black. I tried again, and it did the same thing. Like the phone didn't want me to record it. After a few seconds, the thing just slowly started to drift upwards, out of sight behind the trees. I stood there for a long time, feeling like I was forgetting something important, but nothing came to me. I called the police to report it. They said someone else had called about strange lights near the same spot, and that they'd send someone to check it out. I waited, watching the field, but nothing came back. A patrol car showed up maybe 40 minutes later. We walked out together to the spot. What we found was just a patch of grass, blackened and scorched. It wasn't burned by fire, no ashes or char marks, but the grass was dead, like it had been fried by some intense heat. No debris, no footprints, no signs of anything besides that scorched circle maybe 6 feet wide. The officer looked at me like I was making it up. I showed him the spot where I said the thing hovered, but it was empty now, just that scorched grass. He asked if I wanted to come down to the station and make a report. I did, but even sitting there telling the story felt weird. Like maybe I was remembering wrong. That night, on the way home from the station, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see it again. But there was nothing, just the streetlights and the dark fields. The next day, I went back to the field during daylight. The grass had started to grow back, green shoots poking through the dead spot. There was no sign of anything else, no strange tracks or marks in the dirt, nothing. I tried telling a couple friends, but they just laughed it off. Said it was probably some weird weather thing or someone messing with me. I wanted to believe that, but something about the silence and the way it moved just didn't sit right. Sometimes at night when I'm lying in bed, I think about how that thing didn't make a sound and how my phone just died when I tried to film it, like it didn't want to be seen or recorded. I don't know what it was or why it was there. I don't even know if it was really there, but the scorched grass is real. And that, to me, is the only part I can't explain. I had set up my telescope in the backyard around midnight, like I did most clear nights. It's just a hobby, nothing serious, but I like to track whatever's out there, planets, satellites, the usual stuff. I'm not an expert or anything, just a guy who enjoys the quiet and the stars. That night, the sky was clear and cold, crisp enough that the air felt sharp in my lungs when I breathed through the scope's eyepiece. I was watching the usual spots moving from one star cluster to another when out of nowhere I caught something strange. It was a bright light, small but definitely moving fast, cutting across the sky much quicker than a plane or a satellite. I thought maybe it was just a plane, but the way it moved didn't fit. Planes don't move like that, especially not that fast and not that high up. I followed it with the telescope, adjusting the focus as it came closer to the edge of my view. The light was a steady, cool white, nothing blinking or changing colors like a normal aircraft. Then it did something I wasn't expecting at all. It made a sharp turn like a perfect 90-degree angle. One moment it was heading east, and in a blink it was going straight north. No slowing down, no curve, just a clean corner turn. It didn't make any noise that I could hear, and it didn't leave any kind of trail or vapor. It was just this single light zipping through the sky, turning like it was on rails. I blinked and looked away for a second, thinking I must be seeing things. But when I looked back, it was still there, moving at the same crazy speed, making another sharp turn. It almost felt like it was playing with me, just looping around in this impossible way. I grabbed my phone to try and record it through the eyepiece, but my hands were shaking too much to get a clear shot. The object kept moving, sometimes disappearing behind a patch of tree line from my view, then reappearing again. I tried to tell myself it was some drone or military test, but I couldn't think of anything that could make those kinds of turns without slowing down or crashing. What made it worse was how quiet it was. I live just outside town, so there's usually a bit of background noise. Cars, dogs barking, even a plane or two passing by. But this thing moved without a sound. The night felt too still all of a sudden, like the usual noises had been sucked out of the air. After a while, the object sped off toward the horizon, getting smaller until it was just another faint dot in the sky. I kept watching until it disappeared completely, but I never saw it again that night. The next day, I checked online to see if anyone else had reported something similar, but there was nothing. No news, no local buzz, no radar blips or warnings from the FAA. I even called a friend who flies for a living, hoping he'd have some kind of explanation, but he just laughed and said planes don't do 90-degree turns like that, especially not silent ones. That night left me uneasy, like something about what I saw wasn't supposed to be possible. I went back out a few more times, hoping to catch it or something like it again, but nothing. Just the usual stars, satellites, and airplanes making their slow arcs. I still look up most nights, wondering if it'll come back or if I was just losing my mind for a moment. But there's that missing part. Why was it there? How could it move like that? And why does it feel like the sky wasn't quite right after it passed? I don't know. I guess that's the weird part. No answers, just that silent light that cut across the night and disappeared like it never belonged. We were out in the middle of nowhere, just a group of 4 friends camping like we'd done a dozen times before. No cell signal, just woods and stars and a fire crackling between us. It was late, maybe around midnight, and the air was cool, but still nothing unusual at first. We were just talking, passing around a flask, sharing stories. Then Mark, the one who always claimed he could spot anything weird in the sky, suddenly pointed up and said, "Hey, check that out!" We all looked up, and there was this small white light darting around high above the trees. It wasn't like a plane or a helicopter. It moved too fast, and the way it zigzagged was all wrong for any normal flying thing. At first, it was just flickering back and forth, like it was dancing. Then it sped up and changed direction sharply, almost like it was making 90-degree turns without slowing down. It was weird enough that none of us said a word for a while, just watching. Anna pulled out her phone trying to get video. Then Mike did the same. I reached for mine too, and as soon as all three phones were up and trying to focus on the light, they all went black for a second, then rebooted at the exact same time. It was creepy, like some kind of glitch, but way too coordinated. We looked at each other, and none of us could explain it. We tried again. Same thing. As soon as we pointed our phones at the light, they'd all shut down and restart. This went on for a few minutes. The light kept moving around, and we kept trying to record, but the phones just refused. The weirdest part was that during those blackouts, the only thing we could hear was the fire crackling and our own breathing. No static, no electronic noise, just silence. The light would suddenly stop, hover for a few seconds, then shoot off in another impossible zigzag pattern. It felt like it was watching us, or maybe testing us. After about half an hour, it disappeared behind the trees, and the phone started working normally again. We sat there in silence for a long time, none of us wanting to break the quiet. I don't know what that light was. I don't know why the phones died all at once. It didn't feel like anything I've heard about before, no flashing saucers or beams or anything like that. But ever since that night, every time I'm alone in the dark, I get this feeling like something is just out of sight, watching, waiting. I guess that's what I'm stuck with now, just the memory of that impossible light and the silence that came with it. We'd been camping out in the woods for 2 days, just me and my son. I wanted to do something different for his birthday, so we picked a spot a little off the beaten path, nowhere with cell service or much noise besides the forest itself. I figured it'd be good to get him away from screens for a bit, let him experience the quiet. It was supposed to be simple, some fishing, a little hiking, and sleeping under the stars. The first night was normal enough. We set up the tent, cooked some hot dogs over the fire, and then settled in for bed around 10. The air was cool but not cold, and the usual sounds of the forest were all around us, the rustle of leaves, crickets chirping, an owl or two hooting far off. I remember thinking it was peaceful, the kind of quiet you get when you're not in a city. My son fell asleep pretty fast, and I stayed up a little longer just listening to the night. When I finally nodded off, I didn't expect anything strange to happen, but I woke up in the middle of the night, not sure why at first. The tent felt different, like something was off. It was darker than before, like the stars had disappeared. I blinked a few times, trying to get my eyes to adjust. Then I realized my watch was dead. That struck me as odd. It had been fully charged that morning. I reached over and grabbed my son's phone to check the time. Nothing, just a black screen. I tried my own phone, no power. I even checked the small flashlight I always keep in my bag, and it wouldn't turn on. Every battery-powered device we had was completely dead. I started to feel that creeping kind of worry you get when things just don't add up. I opened the tent flap to look outside, expecting the usual night sounds, some breeze, maybe the distant call of an animal, but there was nothing. No wind, no insects, no birds. Total silence. The kind of silence that feels like the forest itself is holding its breath. The trees stood perfectly still, not a leaf moved. The air was thick, heavy. I looked up trying to see the stars, but the sky was blank, like someone had painted over it with a smooth black canvas. I felt a tight knot in my chest and closed the flap again, hoping I was just imagining things. I woke my son, whispering his name softly. He opened his eyes, rubbing them. I showed him the dead devices, and he looked confused but calm. We both sat up, the silence pressing in on us. I kept glancing outside the tent, half expecting to see something, a person, an animal, anything, but there was nothing. I checked the batteries in my gear bag, thinking maybe it was some kind of coincidence that everything died at once, but every pack, every battery was fine. Nothing looked damaged or loose. After a while, I tried calling out, just my son's name, to see if anyone was nearby. No answer. No response. No echo. Even my voice felt swallowed by the quiet. We stayed like that for a long time, just listening to nothing. When the first light of dawn crept over the trees, the silence finally broke. Birds started to call, the wind picked up again, and the forest felt alive. I checked my phone, and it powered back on, showing a full battery. My watch ticked normally, too. We packed up quickly, neither of us saying much on the hike back to the car. The whole way, I kept looking back at the trees, half expecting to see something watching us. But nothing ever did. That night, back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd been somewhere in between, a space where the normal rules didn't apply. I've told a few people what happened, but no one seems to have an answer. I still don't know what to make of it. We'd been out in the woods for a couple of hours, just my buddies and me, hunting like we'd planned all week. It was late afternoon, the kind of day where the light starts to fade, but still hangs on just enough to see the trails. The forest was quiet, way quieter than usual for this time of year, which already had me on edge. We were walking a ridge that overlooks a small valley, moving slow and scanning for movement. I was up front when I caught it out of the corner of my eye. A deer standing just off the trail, maybe 30 yards ahead. What made it weird right away was how still it was. It wasn't grazing or looking around like a normal deer. It was just frozen, like someone had hit pause on it. No twitching ears, no tail flicks, no breathing that I could see. The whole group stopped and went quiet. We've all hunted enough to know when something's off, and this was different. I could feel the tension in the air, like something wasn't right. The deer's eyes caught the last bit of daylight and reflected back at me, but it wasn't that normal orange or yellow deer eye glow. These eyes shone with this icy, unnatural blue light. I don't even know how to describe it other than it looked wrong, like a camera flash on a dead animal or something frozen in time. I whispered to the others to hold still and watch, but none of us moved. I could hear the leaves rustle lightly in the breeze, birds far off, but the deer was still as a statue. I started to wonder if maybe it was some kind of trick of the light or if the fog from earlier had messed with my eyes, but the more I looked, the more it felt like I was staring at something that wasn't alive. Then, out of nowhere, it bolted, but not like any deer I'd ever seen. It shot off uphill faster than any animal could run. I mean, it disappeared up the steep slope in a blink. No bounding leaps or pauses, just a straight, impossible sprint uphill, the kind of speed that made my head spin. We all just stood there for a second, stunned. Nobody said anything for a long time. The sound of its hooves pounding against the hard earth was gone before we could even process what we'd seen. I tried to convince myself it was just a freak moment. Maybe the deer was paralyzed for some reason and then startled. But none of it added up. You don't see eyes glow like that unless there's something strange going on. And you definitely don't see a deer shoot uphill like it's got some kind of rocket strapped to its legs. After that, the woods felt different. The quiet was heavier, like the trees were watching. We tried to shake it off, but something was wrong. We kept moving, but the tension didn't leave. Every shadow seemed longer, every crack of a twig sharper. On the way back, I caught myself glancing behind more than usual. Nothing followed us, no sounds or shapes, but I couldn't get the image of those eyes out of my head. We got back to the trucks without incident, but that feeling of being watched didn't stop until I was inside my house. Doors locked, lights on. Even now, I can't explain what we saw that afternoon. I've hunted these woods for years and never seen anything like it. Sometimes I wonder if it was just a deer at all. I didn't notice it right away. The radar logs were just something I started digging through out of boredom after I retired. I'd spent 30 years in air traffic control, mostly military, and I liked the routine of scanning data. Something about watching patterns and spotting mistakes gave me a sense of purpose, even if no one else cared. After I left the tower for good, I got access to some old, archived radar sweeps from my last few years, just for personal interest, not for anything official. The files weren't classified or anything, just boring maintenance backups most people never look at. I loaded them onto a little program I had on my home computer that lets you scrub through time and watch aircraft movement frame by frame. Most of it's commercial traffic, some military training flights, and a whole lot of nothing. One night, I was going through a set from March 2019. This would have been about 3 weeks before I turned in my badge. I was filtering for anomalies, unidentified transponders, unusual altitudes, that sort of thing. Around 0200Z, that's 9 p.m. local time, I spotted a ping that didn't make any sense. It showed up at 42,000 feet, doing nearly 1,100 knots. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The returns weren't clean, only a few sweeps picked it up, but it was consistent enough to trace. It appeared northeast of the station, moving southwest, stopped. Not slowed down, stopped. Just held position at that altitude for 4 sweeps, then reversed course. Exactly reversed. Same vector, opposite direction, same speed. No banking, no arc, no turning radius, like it pivoted in midair. That's not something an aircraft can do. Not at that speed, not at that height. Even drones don't behave that way, not unless they're close to the ground and moving slow. I zoomed in on the timestamp and coordinates. When I mapped it out, the ping had passed almost directly over my property. I live in a rural area about 30 minutes from base. No neighbors within a quarter mile, just pine and open field. At first, I figured I must have made a mistake, got the coordinates wrong, or misread the scale. But I double-checked. It was right above my house. That night, back in 2019, I was home. I remember it clearly because we'd lost power for a couple hours around 8:30. Just a localized outage, maybe weather-related, even though the sky had been clear. I'd lit a few candles and sat on the porch. No phone, no TV, just quiet. I remember hearing a low humming sound that didn't seem to come from any direction. I assumed it was a generator from one of the farms across the hills, but it had a weird vibration to it, like it was in my ears instead of outside. It lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then the power flickered back on and the hum stopped. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I saw that radar return, same date, same time frame, it lined up almost exactly. I pulled up additional sweeps from the surrounding stations, thinking maybe I could triangulate or catch another return. There was nothing. Whatever it was, only my station picked it up. Which was strange, because normally if something's flying that fast at that altitude, it'll light up multiple arrays. I thought maybe it was a local bug in the system. So I checked other nights, looked through logs going back 3 months before and 3 after, nothing similar, no other unexplained returns like that one, just that single event that one night. I printed out the log, 6 returns total, 2 on approach, 2 holding still, 2 departing, all within less than a minute. I sat with that for a while. Didn't tell anyone. I knew what people would say, and honestly, I didn't even know what I was looking at. A few nights later, I went outside around the same time just to see if I'd notice anything. I didn't expect to. It was cold, sky was clear, quiet again. Around 9:15, the dogs across the field started barking. I don't have a dog, but the neighbor about half a mile down does, and I can usually hear it faintly when it's riled up. This time it sounded wrong, panicked, not aggressive. Then it just stopped, like someone had cut the sound mid-yelp. Right after that, the humming came back. Same tone, same feeling, more in my head than in my ears. I stood still, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. No lights in the sky, no movement, just the hum. Then my porch light flickered and went out. The house behind me went completely dark too. No breakers tripped, just dark. I turned and looked up. Still nothing visible, but something felt wrong. Like I was being watched, but not from the woods. More like from above. It lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then the light came back on, hum stopped, and everything felt normal again. But the air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone or scorched wires. I went back inside and checked the weather logs, thinking maybe there was some kind of static buildup or high-altitude lightning. Nothing. Conditions were stable. No wind, no fronts. Out of curiosity, I put a cheap portable weather station on the roof the next day. Just one of those basic ones with pressure, temp, and magnetic field sensors. 2 nights later, same time, same hum. Lasted less than a minute that time. But the station spiked. Magnetic field jumped about 40 microteslas for 12 seconds, then dropped back. That's not normal. Not around here. And there were no geomagnetic storms reported that week. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, duration. The events weren't daily, more like once every 4 or 5 nights. always around the same time window, 9:05 to 9:20. Always brief, always followed by either a power flicker or a dog barking or some kind of low-frequency hum. I told a guy I used to work with. He brushed it off, said it was probably an electrical fault or maybe a nearby transformer messing with the grid, but none of this showed up in the utility reports. After about a month, I stopped noticing the hum, or maybe it stopped happening. Either way, nothing strange happened for a while. The radar logs after that night stayed clean. No more odd returns. Then, one afternoon, I was checking the solar panels on my roof and noticed a patch of scorched shingle right above the master bedroom, round, about a foot across. No sign of impact, no charring around the edges, just the top layer of material blistered like it had been flash heated. There'd been no storms, no downed lines. I couldn't explain it. I didn't climb up there again. Eventually, I stopped checking the radar logs. It started to feel obsessive, and I wasn't finding anything new, but I saved that one printout, the anomaly. It's still in my desk drawer. Sometimes I wake up around 9:10 for no reason and just lie there listening. And every so often the porch light flickers. Just once. Never long enough to mean anything. I was 16, and it was a normal Thursday after school. I usually took the same route home from the bus stop, about 10 minutes on foot through a quiet neighborhood with a few streetlights and some trees lining the sidewalks. Nothing fancy, no weird shortcuts or anything. That day, I had my phone out, like always, scrolling through messages and music while walking. I didn't think much of it until I got home and plugged my phone into my laptop to charge. I noticed my voice recorder app had been on. I swear I never turned it on. I usually don't mess with that. The file was timestamped starting exactly when I'd gotten off the bus, right at the moment I started walking home. Curious, I hit play. The first few seconds were just static. Then I heard this faint clicking noise. It was metallic, like tapping or some kind of machinery, but really soft and distant. The clicking wasn't regular, like a clock ticking. It was random, uneven, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. It went on like that for almost an hour. That's when I realized something was wrong. My walk home was supposed to take 10 minutes. I didn't remember walking for an hour. I checked my messages, calls. Nothing showed I'd been anywhere else, and no one texted or called me during that time. I asked my mom if I'd come home late or if she'd noticed anything, but she said I got home on time, just like always. I tried to remember the walk itself. I usually notice things, the way the wind smells, streetlights flickering, a neighbor's dog barking, but this time, my memory was blank. Nothing. Like the whole walk was erased or skipped over. The next day, I went back over the route, trying to see if maybe I'd taken a wrong turn or got lost. The neighborhood was the same. I checked the streetlights and trees, hoping for some clue. Nothing seemed out of place. I listened to the recording a few more times. The clicking never changed, and the static was always there underneath. Sometimes I thought I heard faint voices, but it was impossible to make out words. It was like background noise you couldn't focus on. A few days later, I showed the recording to a friend who's into tech stuff. He said maybe it was interference or some app glitch, but when I played the recording on his phone, the clicking was still there, clear as day. He looked kind of unsettled and told me to be careful, like maybe something weird was going on. After that, I started feeling off when I walked home. Sometimes I thought I saw shadows moving just outside my vision, but when I turned, nothing was there. I felt like I was being watched, even in broad daylight. My phone would buzz or light up randomly, but it was always silent when I checked it. One night I checked my phone again and noticed a new recording file. I hadn't done anything with the recorder. This one was just about 20 seconds long, filled with that same static and clicking noise. No idea where it came from. I stopped using my phone on the walk home for a while. I tried to keep my head down, get home fast, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I never saw anything concrete. No lights, no shapes, no people following me. Just that sound on the recording and that strange blankness in my memory. I kept thinking maybe I was just tired or stressed, but nothing else about my life was unusual. Eventually, I started taking the bus all the way home, even though it made me late. I didn't want to walk that route anymore. The recordings stayed on my phone. I never deleted them. I listened again sometimes, trying to figure out what that clicking was. I don't know. I still don't. I don't know what happened during that hour, and I don't know why I can't remember it. But that recording, that noise, it's the closest thing I have to proof that something was wrong that day. Something that I can't explain. I was out riding my bike late one night, something I'd done plenty of times before. I like the quiet, the way the streets feel different after midnight. Empty, calm, almost like the world's taking a breath. This night started the same. The air was cool, but not cold, and the roads were empty, except for me. I wasn't going far, just a loop I knew well, something to clear my head. I was probably about 10 miles into the ride when I first noticed the lights. At first, I thought it was just a car way behind me. The glow was faint but steady. 2 sets of headlights, nothing unusual, just far enough back to be out of sight in the distance. I figured it would pass me soon or turn off somewhere, but it didn't. As I pedaled, I glanced over my shoulder a couple of times. The lights stayed at the same distance behind me, matching my speed perfectly. I thought maybe it was someone just following the road too, going the same way. That happens sometimes, especially late at night. The thing was, the lights weren't acting like a car at all. No engine noise, no taillights, no change in brightness or angle, like headlights on a turn. They just stayed perfectly aligned with me, as if locked on. When I sped up a little, they sped up too. They sped up too. When I slowed down, they did the same. It was almost like they were watching me. I tried to tell myself it was just coincidence, maybe another cyclist with bright lights, or a car that was being extra careful behind me. But there wasn't a single sound to go with those lights, not even the faintest hum of an engine or tires on asphalt. After a few miles, I decided to stop at a red light. I slowed down, brought my bike to a halt, and looked back. The lights vanished instantly, like they disappeared into thin air. I waited a few seconds, heart starting to beat a little faster, then took off again. Right when I picked up speed, the lights reappeared a little ways back, falling into sync with my pace again. It was exactly the same as before. They mirrored every change I made, every turn I took. I tried to shake the feeling that something was off, but the way they matched me so precisely made my skin crawl. I rode through a couple of empty neighborhoods, streets lit only by dim street lamps and the occasional porch light. The lights stayed behind me the whole time. No sound, no headlights reflecting off anything else, just those 2 glowing points locked on. I started to check over my shoulder more often, trying to catch some detail that would explain it, but every time I looked, there was nothing but darkness where the lights should have been. At one point, I swerved sharply onto a side street to see if the lights would do the same. They did. They followed exactly. No lag, no difference in speed or direction. I wasn't imagining it. They were moving with me, matching me perfectly, but without any other sign of a vehicle or person. I began to feel genuinely uneasy, the kind of unsettled where your nerves tighten and your breath gets shallow. It was like being watched, but by something that didn't want me to see it. My hands gripped the handlebars tighter, and I found myself pedaling faster, hoping to lose whatever was behind me. The lights stayed with me. I took the long way home, cutting through back streets and alleys where the light was barely enough to see. The glow stayed steady just behind me, never moving closer, never falling behind. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of prank, maybe someone with a powerful flashlight on a bike or in a car, but nothing made sense. No sound, no visible vehicle, no reflections, nothing. When I finally reached my street, I slowed down again, coming to a stop at the corner. The lights vanished like before. I waited a minute, heart pounding, then looked back into the dark road. No sign of anything. I rode the last block home as fast as I could, locked my bike up, and went inside without looking back. I've thought about that night a lot. The lights that followed me matching every move, disappearing when I stopped. It wasn't a car, not a bike, nothing I could explain. The quiet, the way they moved, the total lack of any noise or reflection. It still feels off. Like something was out there watching me, but not wanting to be seen. I keep wondering if I'm crazy or if maybe I was just tired and imagining things. But I know what I saw. The lights were real. and they weren't just behind me by chance. I was flying a routine evening shift, just me in the sky, nothing fancy. I work as a small charter pilot, mostly short hops between regional airports, nothing commercial or fancy. That night, I was flying from a small town upstate to a city about 2 hours north. Clear weather, calm winds, perfect flying conditions. Around halfway through the flight, cruising at about 25,000 feet, I noticed something odd out the left window. At first, it looked like a reflection from my own cockpit glass, but then I realized it wasn't moving with me. It was a solid shape, maybe 2,000 feet away, and it just hovered there, perfectly still. No blinking lights, no engines or contrails, nothing that looked like a regular aircraft. I tried to focus on it more. It was completely smooth and reflective, like a mirror floating in the sky. I could see the faint outline of the sunset on its surface, but no structure or seams, just a dark, shiny shape hovering silently next to me. At first, I thought maybe it was a weather balloon or some sort of research drone, but it didn't drift with the wind, didn't change altitude or position. I changed course slightly, just a few degrees to the right, and it followed me, maintaining the exact same distance and angle. It was almost like it was watching me. I called the control tower, reported a traffic advisory, but they didn't see anything on radar. I told them about the shape, but they just told me to keep an eye out and maintain my heading. No other planes reported anything nearby. I felt a strange kind of unease, not panic, but definitely something off. I've flown at night and in weird weather before, seen things in the sky, satellites, planes, birds, but nothing like this. This object just stayed with me, matching my moves, but never closing distance or showing any signs of being a normal aircraft. After about 10 minutes, I radioed the company dispatcher and told them what I was seeing. They said they hadn't heard anything, no reports on radar, no other pilots mentioning anything unusual. I kept the object in sight and watched it silently for a while, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't until I started my descent toward the airport that the object vanished. No warning, no acceleration or movement. It just disappeared from sight. I scanned the sky, but it was gone, like it had never been there. The rest of the flight was normal, but I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see it again. When I landed and shut down the plane, I checked my flight logs and radared it again. Nothing unusual except for some brief signal interference at the time I saw the object. I've tried telling people what I saw, but most just shrug it off as weather balloons or hallucinations from long hours in the cockpit. But I know what I saw. Something real. Something that didn't fit any explanation I've ever encountered in all my years flying. Since then, I double-check my instruments and try to stay alert for anything out of the ordinary. But part of me wonders if that thing is still out there, watching, waiting, silent and still in the vast sky. I was fiddling with my old ham radio late one night, just like I usually do when I can't sleep. It's a habit more than anything. A way to pass time, listen to the usual crackles and static, maybe catch a random conversation. I'm not some big shot operator or anything, just a guy with a handheld setup and a cheap antenna, sitting in my living room while the city outside sleeps. That night, around midnight, I was scanning through the dead zones, the parts of the dial where normally nothing happens. You know, the static and silence that make you think maybe the radio's broken. That's when I caught something weird. It wasn't a voice or a song, not really anything like the usual chatter. It was this repeating pattern of sounds, almost like Morse code, but not quite. I adjusted the squelch, tweaked the volume, and kept listening. The pattern repeated every 30 seconds or so. It wasn't dots and dashes the way I know them. It was more mechanical, precise, like a machine trying to talk but not quite speaking our language. The sounds were short bursts, clicks or pulses, but arranged in a way that suggested meaning, or at least intention. I tried recording it on my phone, but the quality wasn't great. Still, I played it back, trying to decode anything familiar. Nothing added up. The sequence repeated endlessly, never speeding up or slowing down like a loop. I ran it through a Morse translator app just for kicks, and it spit out nonsense. Random letters, no words. Over the next hour, I kept hearing it, always the same pattern. I even tried tuning other nearby frequencies, thinking maybe it was interference or a prank, but no. This thing was locked in on that dead channel, crystal clear, cutting through the static like it belonged there. At some point, I noticed something else. The usual background hum of my radio equipment, the low electrical buzz, started to fade, as if the device itself was quieting down to let the signal through. That was strange because my radio is old and noisy. It felt like the signal was overpowering the normal sounds. I remember feeling this creeping chill, like I was listening to something I wasn't meant to. I got up to grab a flashlight and check the antenna on the balcony, just to make sure nothing was loose or interfering. When I looked back inside, the radio had completely cut off the static. The only sound was the pattern itself, pure and steady, no background noise. I sat back down, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Then I noticed the clock on the wall. It was off by 6 minutes. I was sure I'd been listening for an hour, but somehow 6 minutes had disappeared. I checked my phone's timestamp on the recording and saw the same thing. The audio skipped exactly 6 minutes in the middle of the pattern. No breaks, no glitches, just a sudden jump. I went outside to get some fresh air. The street was empty and quiet, nothing out of the ordinary except that the streetlights flickered for a second. The whole block dimmed, then came back on. I thought maybe it was a power surge, but nothing was reported on the news later. When I went back inside, the pattern was still playing, unchanged. But then out of nowhere, it stopped, just cut out like someone hit mute. The radio went back to static, like nothing had happened. I tried to get the pattern back, but it never came. I kept scanning that dead frequency every night for a week, but it was silent. The antenna was fine. My gear worked as usual. I don't know what I heard that night. The pattern, the silence that followed, the missing minutes. It didn't make sense. It felt like I was tuning into something that was there and then vanished. I can't explain it, and I'm not sure I want to. But that signal is still stuck in my head like a ghost frequency that only I ever heard.